Chapter 24. Save the world. With just you. The world is safe under the protection of His Excellency Mediv. You don't have to worry about it. A mere magic apprentice wants to surpass the great guardian. Duke Marcus. You're insulting His Excellency the Archmage. You're insulting this supreme spell temple. The mere magic apprentices didn't have the right to interrupt. It was the Storm City mages who followed Mediv who roared angrily. Not only were there official mages, but there were also court mages who had a higher status. The apprentices who were envious and angry at Duque just now all retreated to the second line at this time. They looked at Duque, who was in the center of the storm, with hostile eyes that harbored ill intentions and were ready to watch a good show. At first it was just accusations, but a few seconds later, it was full of curses. The mages' necks were red and their mouths were wide open enough to see their throats. With words that didn't lose their status, they almost crazily fired at Duque. Mediv, who still maintained his gentlemanly demeanor, frowned while Duque was stunned. Haters, no matter which world it was, existed. Haters almost didn't need a reason to scold people. But haters who had a reason to scold people were definitely earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Almost endless curses drowned the entire temple, and Mediv, or rather Mediv, who was controlled by Sardra's will, intentionally or unintentionally expressed his shock, but secretly added fuel to the fire. Originally, as long as he said a word, he could protect Duque and let Duque avoid the siege. He didn't. In Sardra's view, as long as the young Duque was under such shocking pressure, Duque's young heart would collapse, and he would succumb and kneel at his feet while crying bitterly. But Duque's reaction was beyond his expectations. Duque just stood there proudly, frowning coldly at the thousands of people pointing at him. Sardra's didn't know the fact that Duque was a transmigrator. Actually, at this moment Duque was thinking about something else. It's a good thing that I've transmigrated to this early in the Azeroth, because this is the last time of peace in the Azeroth. I still have time to accumulate my strength. It's a bad thing that I've transmigrated so early into Azeroth, because these guys have been peaceful for far too long. A long period of peace could make people forget the existence of danger. There was no change in the upper echelons of the kingdom, causing people to lose their drive to improve. It also caused corruption and arrogance to grow in people's hearts, but no one noticed it. Perhaps he had sensed it but felt that it was only natural. The hereditary system of nobility made every noble and even every person in a high position think that they were born noble, that they could transcend the mortal world, and that they were above the rest of the people. Rather than saying that they were besieging Duque for speaking boldly, it would be better to say that Duque had unintentionally provoked the entire aristocratic system that relied on inheritance, and they were overreacting. It was very simple. Medivh's mother Aegwyn was the world guardian, a symbol of immortality who had lived for more than 800 years. She passed on such a noble and powerful position as the world guardian to her son, which was the highest symbol of the noble bloodline that lasted for thousands of years. And at this moment the bold and reckless Duque actually said that he wanted to surpass this noble symbol of inheritance with the body of a commoner. This undoubtedly offended the biggest reverse scale of all the people in a high position. Duque suddenly smiled bitterly. It turned out that no matter which world, history would be shockingly similar. Countless great empires in ancient times on Earth had perished here, and today history seemed to be repeating the same mistakes. Since he had transmigrated, he could not go back. His fate had already been closely linked with this world of Azeroth that was about to face countless dangers of destruction. Then he had to do something. Duque suddenly felt that all the sounds around him had disappeared. Countless fingers that were pointing at his chest and face suddenly became blurry. Those noble mages were like a clumsy puppet in a play. They could not affect Duque's thoughts at all. As a transmigrator, Duque carefully felt the pulse of fate from the world of Azeroth, felt the almost irresistible impact from the river of fate, and recalled the meaning of his existence as a transmigrator. At first, Duque was at a loss. He did not know what he could do. He did not know what he wanted to do either. Perhaps it was purely for his own survival and development, going with the flow. There was a question that had been bothering Duque for a long time, and that was, if the fate of the world of Azeroth still maintained that terrible inertia, what should he do? Now the answer to this question was becoming clearer in Duque's mind. So what if it was fate? Fight it. Reverse it. I will never be a slave to fate. I, Duque, want to be the master of fate. He was surrounded by angry and even morbid gazes, Duque was the only unusual person in the room. The weak him should have surrendered. However, Duque felt that a surge of hot blood was being pumped out from his heart, rushing through his arteries into his body. It was like 10,000 horses galloping, making a rolling sound like thunder, spreading the excitement to every corner of his body, infecting every cell in his body. The corner of Duque's mouth curved upwards. He should be angry, he should be sneering. However, it was as if his soul had left his body, floating above the hall, quietly looking down at these seemingly strong but actually weak fellows. His gaze seemed to have transcended time and space. The scenes that happened in the game were replayed in Duque's field of vision. He saw Stormwind City being attacked by the ferocious orc army. This beautiful outer wall, the capital of the largest human kingdom in the south, was destroyed in the flames of destruction. He saw humans recover Stormwind City under the leadership of Anduin Lothar. A brand new, more vibrant kingdom was reborn from the ashes of destruction. Then it was destroyed again and reborn again. The indomitable will of the human race was perfectly reflected here in Stormwind City. And countless inspiring heroes were also born in this crisis that could possibly lead to the destruction of the world. Recalling those great scenes, Duque suddenly felt lucky. This time he could finally participate in this great epic as a participant. Suddenly Duque laughed out loud. Ha ha, ha ha, ha. The arrogant laughter shocked the entire audience. Every mouth that was cursing was left open and forgot to close. Every finger that was pointing at him was frozen in the air. The mages were stunned. Duque's arrogant gaze swept 180 degrees from left to right. So, just the dream of surpassing the legendary realm is already blasphemy. So, just the unwillingness to be ordinary is already a sin in your eyes. So, the dignified Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy is actually so narrow-minded. No wonder everyone talks about the greatest mage Holy Land being the Dalajan and not Stormwind City. Alright, since you're not staying, then I'll leave. Everyone bye-bye. Or, are you going to sentence me to death for offending the guardian Medivh? Chapter 25. If it was said that Duque was still a little confused before the appearance of Medivh, then at this moment, Duque had undergone earth-shattering changes. Perhaps it was because he had provoked Medivh, who was possessed by Sargeras, that forced Duque's mind into a corner. That was why Duque's mind became so clear all of a sudden. Since Medivh was shot and possessed by Sargeras just like in the game, then according to the terrible nature of Azeroth's history, Duque no longer expected anything good to happen next. Lordaeron, Dalajan, Alterac, Kurtiras, Gilnis, Rapid Hold and Stormwind City, these were the 7 largest kingdoms in the world. Except for the island kingdom Kurtiras, which was far away from the mainland, the other 6 kingdoms would be destroyed one by one in the coming time. They would either be destroyed by the orcs or by the Scourge army. The only human kingdom that could constantly be destroyed and reborn was Stormwind City. That was also the last hope of mankind. As a human, Duque was very sure that his own future was also in Stormwind City. Thinking of the disaster that would follow in Stormwind City and even the whole of Stormwind City, Duque understood what he had to do. First, he had to accumulate strength. That must be enough to affect the incident at the Dark Portal. Now, in a direct confrontation, Sargeras had no chance of winning. Even if he only had a soul left, he was still a super boss who had mastered the power of Medivh as a guardian. As an outsider, Duque was very clear that no one would believe him no matter what he said. On the other hand, the more he said, the faster he died. However, a Medivh controlled by Sargeras would die. Facing such a big boss who was extremely good at playing with souls, he would not be able to live in peace even if he died. Duque threw caution to the wind, truly threw caution to the wind. On the surface, Duque was challenging the authority, but in fact he was setting a trap for Duque. As long as he maintained his identity as the Medivh, as long as he didn't take off this hypocritical mask, he had to treat Duque fairly. Moreover, Duque was still a child. The Medivh raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. It was as if all the voices in the hall had been sucked out. Everyone's mouths were agape and their arms were raised. Their expressions were still agitated, but they could no longer make a sound. Everyone from the Wong family's Magic Association of Stormwind City, I just want to ask, where is your demeanor? Where is your magnanimity as a noble? Was it wrong for a half-grown child to talk about his great dream? Is there a need to make it sound so serious? Why was everyone so excited just now? It was all because that bastard Sargeras had secretly used a demonic trick similar to berserk aura. But now, Sargeras was acting like a just and strict wise man, advising all the mages who made extreme remarks with a straight face. Seeing this scene, Duque wanted to vomit. Duque was silent and looked at the Mediv stubbornly. Sargeras smiled. He walked over and seemed to want to pat Duque's shoulder lightly. However, as if afraid of being infected by the plague, Duque flashed and backed away. Heh. Seems like you have a deep prejudice against me. You could have stopped them long ago. Duque spoke the truth. The Mediv looked a little embarrassed. Sorry, I was stunned for a moment too. Duque was still staring at the Mediv. All right, this is indeed the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy's lack of manners. Duque, your dream is actually not too much. The doors of me and the Royal Magic Academy are still open for you. As an apology, you can choose any mage in the academy to be your teacher. I guarantee in the name of the dean that no mentor will refuse you. As long as you join our academy, you will get a 20% discount on all the materials and spell formulas you exchange for. As soon as the Mediva's words fell, there was an immediate uproar. Preferential treatment. This was too preferential treatment. Unfortunately, Duque knew that Sargeras's words were almost like a fart. Duque didn't even care about the strongest mage, Mediv. Who would dare to be his teacher? Wouldn't that be a slap in the face to the Mediv? Even if Duque forced him to be his teacher, who would dare to really teach Duque real knowledge? At this moment, even old man Norton, who was the closest to Duque, was afraid that Duque would look at him. He quietly took 2 steps back and lowered his head to hide behind the crowd. The only useful thing was that 20% discount. Of course, the premise was that Duque had to become a part of the academy. The corner of Duque's mouth curled into a smile. At this moment he actually had a second choice: to abandon Stormwind City and join the arms of the Holy Land of Mages, Dalajan. Perhaps this could allow him to temporarily leave the center of this worldwide storm, but it would also cause him to lose a very important opportunity to rise. Alright, as long as I can read the information in the library according to your rules, I agree to join the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy. As for the mentor, I don't think anyone will be willing to be my mentor. So let's forget about this. The moment he finished speaking, Duque could totally imagine what would happen next. As expected, in the next second there was an uproar. Arrogant. Too arrogant. A mere apprentice not only claimed to surpass the world's strongest mage, Mediv, but also publicly announced that he didn't need a mentor? Did he really think he was a self-taught super prodigy? But when everyone saw Mediva's gesture, no one dared to utter a single word. However, in their hearts, they threw the worst possible evaluation onto Duque. As an apprentice, Mediv seemed to be in a dilemma. That's right, our public library is open to all members. However, the number of books and the level of magic you are allowed to read varies for each rank. As an apprentice, there aren't many books that are suitable for you to read. Usually, you will start from the apprentice's handbook, provided by the mentor. Duque took 2 steps forward and asked boldly, "Then may I ask, what are the requirements to become a formal mage?" Without waiting for Mediv to speak, Mediva's disciple Khadgar answered first. Under the witness of 3 official magi, if you cast 3 level 1 spells without the help of any magic items, then you can be recognized as a primary magus. The current Khadgar was very young, probably around the same age as Duque. He was around 13 or 14 years old, and his face had a clear immaturity to it. The mustache that everyone would be familiar with in the future was now only a vague outline. He had short black hair and a fair face. Apart from not looking like a farmer's son, he was no different from any other youth in Stormwind City. Khadgar had been sent to the Dalajan by his family when he was 6 years old to learn all kinds of magic. It was only recently that he had officially become Mediva's disciple. Even though Khadgar was talented and intelligent, he was still not a novice mage. At this moment, Duque's clear voice shocked everyone present. Then I, Duke Marcus, request to take the novice mage exam. Chapter 26. Wow. The dozens of people present, whether they were highly respected old mages or young mage apprentices, all had their mouths wide open. Their mouths were wide enough to fit a fist. What's going on? Did I hear it wrong? That arrogant rookie mage apprentice actually requested to undergo a promotion trial on his first day in Stormwind City's Magic Academy? No matter how arrogant, there should be a limit. Yet Duque dared to do so. It was said that Duque had only been confirmed a few days ago that he had talent in magic. If Duque really succeeded, then Khadgar would die of shame. He had studied for 8 years and was still not an official mage, but this person had only studied for 3 days and was already a mage. Regardless of whether Duque succeeded or not, this would definitely leave a strong mark on Duque's name in Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy. Success. Famous throughout the academy, and all the mages in Stormwind City would know that there was a super genius here. Failure. Famous throughout the academy, but that would be synonymous with overestimating one's capabilities. Duque would forever be nailed to the pillar of shame. For a moment, everyone's breathing became heavy. Medivh asked in a gentle and refined manner, "You know the conditions to pass. So, Mage Apprentice Duke Marcus, are you sure you want to undergo the trial now?" "I'm sure," Duque said firmly. "All right then." Medivh opened his right palm and softly chanted a spell. His palm suddenly lit up with a strange blue light. Like a flame blown by a strong wind, the blue light floated out of Medivh's palm. The bright light turned into ribbons, and with Duque as the center, a circular space of more than 10 meters was easily separated. Looking from the inside or looking from the outside, there was no change in the scenery. Only Duque knew how terrifying Medivh's methods were. System notification. Warning. You have been dragged into an unknown independent space by Medivh Sargeras. Fortunately, the Medivh was not hostile. He even had a gentle smile on his face. This is a relatively independent space. However, it won't affect your communication with the elements realm. Mr. Marcus, you may begin. As long as you don't use magic tools to cast any 3 different level 1 spells, you will become an official member of the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy. Duque took a deep breath and prepared to give it a try. At this moment he saw Darnielle and Itana's concerned faces. He didn't need to confirm to know that the two of them were advising him not to risk his life. She advised him not to show off so much and provoke the old mages. Duque could only smile bitterly. He had no choice but to fight. He did not have the funds to focus on his studies in the academy. If he wanted to make money, he had to go out. Even with Medivh's promise, if he were to temporarily leave the academy as an acolyte, he would definitely be surrounded and attacked by the conservative forces of Stormwind. Even if he could resurrect, running back to his corpse would not help. It was not a big deal for an acolyte to die in the wilderness. However, it was different for a mage. Even if he was a beginner mage, his name would automatically be included in the Stormwind Mage Squad. He would be known by the kingdom's supreme commander, Lothar, and the Stormwind King Lang. Coupled with his super genius title, it was impossible for him not to be noticed. If he was noticed by the king and the commander at the same time, then no matter if it was the nobles or the mages who hated him, they would not be able to act at will. This was Duque's protective talisman. It was enough to let him pass the most dangerous novice period. Duque took a deep breath. He was ready to cast the spell. Generally speaking, it was impossible for an acolyte to recreate the nanny style of casting in the crystal ball of the apprentice trial. It was impossible for an acolyte to have such a keen magic perception ability to reverse deduce the entire incantation, casting formula, contact method with the elements realm, and a series of other things from a fixed and incomparably complicated casting tool. Under normal circumstances, this was something as unreliable as asking a newborn baby to fight lions and tigers. All the mages present knew that Duque did not get even half of the spell formula from any official channel. However, as soon as Duque recited the incantation, the mages were dumbfounded. They had no idea that at this moment, Duque had even let the system control his own tongue. His consciousness had already practiced the awkward-sounding incantation no less than 1,000 times in the system, as if singing along with the karaoke subtitles. What flowed out of Duque's mouth was the perfect High Elves language. The cadence was full of mysterious beauty. The key syllables were short and hurried, but extremely accurate. Without the help of the magic tool, Duque could clearly feel that he was like a tap that had been turned on. The mental and physical strength in his body was rapidly decreasing. However, he could clearly feel that his body and his soul had made a stable connection with a world of a different dimension, the elements realm. A scorching aura quickly spread and gathered on his arm at a high speed. Everyone could see that a huge fireball was forming in Duque's hand. Fireball spell? No. Flame blast spell. The surrounding mages could not help but exclaim in surprise. How old was he when he successfully cast Flame Blast spell for the first time? No one had done it before the age of 20, right? Yet this kid actually managed to do it. There was not the slightest bit of excess elemental energy spilling out. The amount of energy absorbed was simply exquisite. This kind of control, was it really from the hands of an apprentice who had awakened to the power of magic for less than 3 days? Whoosh! As if to slap Medivh in the face, this water tank-sized Flame Blast spell smashed towards Medivh's head. For a powerful guardian, this was not a problem at all. Medivh did not even move his finger. The blue light that was wrapped around Duque just flourished. Everyone saw that Duque's Flame Blast spell was completely erased. You completed the first spell very well. Medivh made the decision on the spot. Then he saw the sweat dripping from Duque's forehead. Do you need to take a break? The time limit for the official beginner mage exam is 1 hour. No need. Duque chose to continue. Even though the system notification showed that his pitiful mana had dropped from the initial full value of 2626 to the current 1226, Duque did not stop. He had a vague premonition that if he continued to squeeze out his potential, there might be some kind of breakthrough. Shaking his head to get rid of the tiredness and disappointment, Duque cooperated with the hand gesture. A soft light blue light was rubbed in Duque's hand. Even from 10 meters away, the mages could still clearly feel the cold air emitted from the light ball in Duque's hand. Frost Arrow. Chapter 27. Swoosh. The frost arrow, which looked ordinary in the eyes of many official mages, was accurately shot out. The magic did not dissipate and there was no earth-shattering power. It just shot at Medivh. If a mage in a group of mages shot this frost arrow on the battlefield, they would at least receive a passable evaluation. It might not be able to kill a fully armed soldier, but it would at least be able to kill an unarmed peasant soldier. This was the power of the arrow. If this was shot by a mage from a group of mages, no one would think much of it. However, when they thought of Duque's ridiculously young face, Duque's performance immediately set off a storm in the hearts of the mages. Damn. How old was this kid? 2 standard and flawless level 1 spells. Even though it looked ordinary, but when they thought of Duque's performance in the trial space, the mages could not remain calm. Deducing the magic formula from a magic item, this was a skill that could only be mastered by at least an expert-level enchanter. What a terrifying genius. Thinking back to how they had recklessly ganged up on the super genius who would definitely be protected by Medivh, these arrogant mages felt a sense of regret, as if their flattery had gone awry. Everyone could see that Duque's magic power was almost depleted. Casting a third spell was too much for his body that was only at the level of an apprentice. At this point, no one doubted that Duque could cast a third spell. The only difference was time. At this moment, Duque suddenly raised his hand. His seemingly weak fingers began to gesture in the air meaninglessly. As his fingers moved, everyone could clearly see that the place where his index finger moved condensed into a blue stream of light that symbolized the radiance of the arcane spell. Increase intelligence. An old mage let out a light laugh and thought to himself, sure enough, a rookie is a rookie. One of the most standard prerequisites for a mage to cast a spell was increase intelligence, which temporarily increased one's intelligence. Not only could it increase the maximum magic power, but it would also slightly increase the power of the spell. No one would remind Duque or laugh at Duque. To them, Duque's current actions were what a rookie should do. It was precisely because of this common mistake in this perfect performance that they suddenly felt less uncomfortable in their hearts. No matter how much of a genius he was, Duque was still a mortal. On the other side, everyone could see that Duque's condition wasn't good. On the sidelines, old man Norton finally couldn't help but pinch his nose and remind him, don't force yourself. Rest quickly or else you might damage your magic circuit. The magic circuit was where the human body stored magic power. A well-trained apprentice or sorcerer could safely and steadily widen his magic circuit through meditation, so that his body could hold more magic power and cast more powerful spells. The magic circuit was not static. Sometimes, it would be destroyed due to all kinds of accidents, or it would open up more and wider circuits under a powerful impact. Now, Duque was obviously squeezing out his potential, forcing himself to immediately cast the third level 1 spell. Under the control of Sargera's will, Medivh very well displayed the demeanor of a superior, a wise and farsighted senior. Young Duque, I strongly suggest that you not continue immediately. Maybe we'll all see a miracle. His eyesight was extremely sharp and he immediately knew what Dooku wanted to do. Duque had purposely used Flame Blast and Frost Arrow to drain his magic power first. It was as if he was being drawn by a syringe as thick as a stick. Duque felt that the energy in his body was decreasing like a flood. Even so, he still hadn't reached his limit. If he lost consciousness, the system elf would take over the control of the spell. If he really died, he could still resurrect. Duque also threw caution to the wind and tried his best to complete the last spell. This was undoubtedly courting death for a real wizard apprentice, but for Duque it was just a relatively safe attack. He wanted to complete this sublimation in front of everyone. If he could even do this, then the more miracles he created in the future would be recognized as normal, and reduce the risk of the special existence of the system being exposed. At the beginning, the mysterious arcana runes whistled through Duque's spirit sea one by one. Soon, Duque ordered the system to deliberately slow it down, and Duque began to carefully compare the functions of the runes that looked like scribbles. It was difficult to describe in detail how increase intelligence worked. If he had to use an appropriate metaphor, it would be a tool. For example, if a person had a grappling hook, they could climb cliffs that couldn't be climbed by human hands. Increase intelligence could add an additional magic circuit to the body of a mage. However, Duque was using the complete magic circuit brought about by increase intelligence to constantly compare the places in his body that could become a magic circuit, using the power of magic to transform his body. Under normal circumstances, according to the common magic theory of Azeroth, this should be done by using a better law of meditation, long-term communication with the elemental world, and using arcana energy to immerse into the body bit by bit to transform the body. Only then could a new magic circuit be developed. Now what Duque was doing was an extremely risky leap. His consciousness was getting more and more blurry, and Duque didn't know when he would lose consciousness. But as the last drop of residual magic power in his body was drained, he felt that his spirit world touched a membrane. On the other side of the membrane, there was a thin but steady stream of mental power. It was also his own power, and he could vaguely feel it even though it was separated by a membrane. Suddenly, the membrane was broken by Duque. Detected that the upper limit of the host's magic power is increasing. Ignoring the system elf's reminder, Duque focused all his attention on the breakthrough. He definitely wouldn't let go of that incomparably wonderful experience. It was as if something that didn't belong to him was bursting forth in his body. There should only be blood and various body fluids flowing in his body, but it was obvious that this was a third thing. Magic power created by the magic circuit by absorbing energy from the outside world, and not pure magic power transformed from his own life energy. Even if this magic power was very, very faint, like a light fog blowing on his face, this power was like a traveler who had been thirsty in the desert for many days. Even the thinnest mist could nourish his body and soul, and become the motivation for him to continue moving forward. Level 1, Increase Intelligence, completed. However, what was more important to all the mages was the faint arcana glow on Duque's body. This was the sign of an official mage. Chapter 28. The arcane barrier had been removed by Medivh at some point in time. It was already the end of spring, but everyone could still see the breath that Duque exhaled. It was a faint breath that contained arcane power. It was precisely because Duke still couldn't control his power that everyone could see the arcana technique aura seeping out. It was obvious that the arcane power was transforming Duque's body. His exposed arms and feet had a very obvious bluish-purple arcane glow. The sudden advancement also temporarily disrupted the senses of Duque's 5 senses. He turned his head and closed his eyes, as if he was not used to the incomparably bright light in the hall. But soon he opened his eyes again and looked straight at them. It was still that pair of deep black eyes, as calm as the water in an ancient well. There was no ecstasy from the advancement on Duque's face, nor any special feelings. There was no anger towards the reprimand of the mages, and there was no retaliation towards the belittling of him. It was as if the advancement was as simple as eating and drinking to Duque. Everyone felt like they were looking at an illusion. It was as if they were not looking at a newcomer who had just gotten rid of his identity as an apprentice and became a mage. Instead, they were looking at another mage god who was not inferior to Medivh. It was like a rising sun that was born in front of them. The light blue glow on Duque's body was not bright. but for a moment, everyone felt that the light of all the magic lights in the hall paled in comparison. Duque struggled to stand up with his hands. His movements were as slow as lifting a rusty golem. But a few seconds later he was completely on his feet, standing proudly in the center of all the lights. Although he had long been the focus of the entire hall, at this moment, everyone's pupils shrank and focused. Suddenly, Duque stumbled and fell forward. Even though he immediately stopped, such a simple movement made everyone subconsciously take 2 steps back, as if Duque was some great demon king from a different world, or an ancient god who had regained his power. Pfft! Duque laughed without any integrity. What? I accidentally advanced. Is there a problem? He accidentally leveled up? Compared to Duque, all the magic apprentices in the lobby were so ashamed that they wanted to die. They were not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry. They were elites from various human kingdoms. Many of them came from mage families or noble families. Most of them were either rich or noble. Originally, they had been thinking about how to compete with Duque, who had been in the limelight this year. Who would have thought that the competition would end before it had even begun? Duque directly left these elite geniuses far behind. The blow was too great. When comparing goods, one should throw them away. Comparisons were odious. At this moment, other than a few people who were quite confident in themselves, everyone lowered their heads in shame and indignation. Darnielle and Itana, who had traveled with Duque not long ago, were so shocked that they almost forgot to breathe. Who would have thought that Duque, who had been on par with them not long ago, would suddenly become a Sir Mage? Even Khadgar, who was Mediva's direct disciple, had his eyes and mouth wide open. He seemed to understand why his master had so eagerly come forward and wanted to take Duque as his disciple. Khadgar felt as if his face was on fire. At this moment, Mediv lightly placed his hand on his disciple's shoulder, giving him a warm and encouraging smile. Then Mediv stepped forward, and with a flick of his wrist, a golden lion emblem the size of a palm condensed from arcane energy appeared in Mediva's hand. Mediva's scholarly face was full of humility and gentleness. His incomparably pure eyes looked straight at Duque. Duke Marcus, I, Mediv, as the Earth's guardian and Stormwind's court archmage, sincerely invite you to join Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy and Stormwind City's National Mage Squad on behalf of me and my good friend, His Majesty King Lang. I wonder if you are willing to accept? It was as if a war maniac was presenting a Nobel Peace Prize to a prize winner. This scene was incomparably strange in Duque's eyes. Even though he knew that the person standing in front of him was the incomparably cunning and sinister Burning Legion's leader, Sardras, he controlled Mediv. Duque still danced with the wolf as if he was playing with fire. Of course, this was also the most thrilling part, because Duque was very clear that Sardras's attention was not on him at all. At best, he was just a little guy with a bright future. The cautious Sardras would at most deal with him along the way, and would not pay special attention to him. After all, at this moment the Council of Tirisful, whose purpose was to protect the world, was still alive. Mediva's mother, Aegwine, was also alive and kicking. Before eliminating these powerful existences that would affect his plan to invade Azeroth, Sardras would never make a mistake and reveal his foxtail in advance. Moreover, Duque, who was familiar with the game process, was very clear that Sardras also had a lot of weaknesses. However, at this moment, after the system elf carefully scanned and confirmed that there was no problem with the arcane emblem, Duque replied in a slightly excited tone like a rookie, I am willing. And so, at this moment, the second youngest official wizard in Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy was born. The first was that freak Mediv, who became an official wizard at the age of 10. Mediv gently pushed the arcane emblem, and it immediately branded on the outside of Duque's left arm. After a slight burning sensation, an arcane emblem with a gold-rimmed lion head appeared on Duque's arm. Welcome, Your Excellency Earth Wizard Marcus, said Mediv. Earth Wizard. At this time, Khadgar took the initiative to explain, Novice Wizard is just a general term for the convenience of ordinary people. In fact, there are still many subdivisions among the wizards. For example, the lowest rank of official wizards is Earth Wizards. Each rank is also divided from 1 to 9. Above that are Sky Wizards, Morning Star Wizards, Radiant Moon Wizards, Breaking Dawn Wizards, and Teachers. Mediv smiled and added, if you are lucky enough to reach my level, you will know. Duque blinked, indicating that he understood. This was very different from the game. In the game there was a simple division of levels from 1 to 100 and there was no such thing as titles. After transmigrating and arriving in the complete world of Azeroth, it was naturally impossible to have such a division. There was still some time before the incident at the Dark Portal, so he had to at least work hard to become a Breaking Dawn wizard. Chapter 29. The scene was very strange. Surrounded by a group of brightly dressed people, a youngster dressed in coarse sackcloth received the arcane badge representing honor and status from the hands of the kingdom's strongest wizard, Medivh. Such a huge contrast made those aristocratic magic apprentices extremely dazzled. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over, but etiquette didn't allow them to lower their heads. Otherwise, not only would it be contempt for Duque, it would also be disrespectful to the Medivh who issued the badge. At this time, applause rang in the surroundings. Whether it was heartfelt blessings or envy, jealousy, and hatred for Duque to go to hell, at least the applause was very warm. Congratulations, Sir Marcus. Congratulations, congratulations. The sounds of flattery rang out incessantly. After becoming an official wizard, the treatment they received was naturally different. Practically everyone had a smile on their face. It was as if the questioning and even the insults from a moment ago were just Duque's hallucination. Duque, you're still young. The world of adults is sometimes so terrible. You just have to get used to it. Medivh smiled warmly at Duque. Very naturally, a clever attendant had already delivered a wine cup filled with fine wine. Originally, this was supposed to be a celebration of the birth of the Royal Magic Academy's chief apprentice. Now that it was brought, the standard was a bit lacking, but the timing was just right. When Duque mechanically picked up the wine cup, Medivh took the initiative to touch his cup with Duque's, and then downed his wine in one gulp. As a senior, as a highly respected court grand wizard, Medivh's appreciation of Duque fell into the eyes of everyone in the surroundings. This was an honor that mortals could only dream of but not reach. Ladies and gentlemen, I still have a lot of things to do, so I will take my leave first. Finished speaking, Medivh left in a carefree manner. As a court grand wizard highly regarded by the king, at this moment, Medivh still performed his duty of assisting the king. In Duque's timeline, Medivh was the busiest and most active at this time. He just didn't know whether the Medivh just now was Sargeras or Medivh's own will, or Medivh's will under Sargeras's mental suggestion. After all, having two souls in one body was the most complicated. However, does this count as running away after acting cool? How exciting! Or could it be that this is more exciting because the boss is forced to run away after acting cool in front of me? Thinking of this, the blood in Duque's body began to boil. He did not expect that he would one day use a supervillain boss as his shield. Duque suddenly realized that he seemed to have awakened some kind of evil attribute that pursued excitement. What happened next had nothing to do with Duque. A guy who looked like a host came up and announced, "All right, now it's time for the apprentice and the mentor to choose." According to the Academy's regulations, the mentors who must recruit magic apprentices this year are. The host rambled on and on about a lot of things that had nothing to do with Duque. In fact, this two-way choice reminded Duque of the talent market. Unfortunately, Duque had even rejected Medivh, so naturally, there would not be any mages who would stick their warm faces to their butts. In previous years, there seemed to be a Chief Magic Apprentice Award ceremony or something. Now that Duque, the Chief Apprentice, had directly become an Earth Mage, this step was saved. The biggest limelight was stolen by Duque, and the rest of the apprentices and mages would not ask for a snub. Soon they dispersed like birds and beasts. It was only then that Darnielle and Itana, who came with Duque, came up. "Congratulations, Duque, Sir Marcus." The ones who spoke were Darnielle and Itana, who did not dare to look Duque in the eye. "Call me Duque." Darnielle seemed a little hesitant, but he still said straightforwardly, "We've discussed it with Mentor Norton and decided to become his disciple." Suddenly Itana looked up. This freckled little girl seemed to have mustered up a lot of courage. "Duque, why don't we beg Mentor Norton together? After all, he was the one who unearthed you." Duque raised a finger and stopped Itana from continuing. Duque thought to himself, if old man Norton dared to accept me, he would have come long ago. I wonder if it's because I'm old and have become timid. He did not blame old man Norton. After all, not everyone had the aptitude and luck to become a hero. However, it was precisely the struggle of a myriad of mortals against fate that created numerous epic events. Everyone has their own standpoint. Besides, the path I'm taking is very different from yours. Learn well from Mentor Norton. If there's anything good, I'll take care of you." The two youngsters nodded, not really understanding. Everyone dispersed. Duque asked the attendant for the location, and under the attendant's guidance he walked through the long marble corridor. Under the gaze of countless people in the paintings, he still knocked on Old Man Norton's door. The one who opened the door was the ordinary second-year female apprentice called Sasha. Seeing Duque outside the door, this female apprentice with flaxen hair and light brown eyes revealed a kind smile. She said to Duque in a low voice, "You really did come. Actually, Mentor has been hoping for you to come. He's not a bad person, he just has too many concerns." After saying that quickly, Sasha said loudly, "Welcome, Your Excellency Duke Marcus. Mentor is free. You can go in yourself." Duque nodded with a smile and walked in with his head held high. Perhaps it was only a temporary room for recruiting apprentices. The room was quite different from what Duque had imagined. To be precise, it was not a room for a sorcerer, but more like a guest room for a noble. There was nothing on the white rectangular oak table, only the gorgeous golden curved edges of the table that were filled with all kinds of arcs could be seen. In front of the table there was a chair with a red velvet background, which allowed apprentices to sit comfortably and communicate with their mentor. The mentor's chair was a little dazzling, because there were two crystal balls infused with arcane energy on the chair, emitting a gentle glow. It was probably to announce the field that Mentor Norton was good at. Arcane. However, Old Man Norton was not sitting on the chair. On the contrary, he was looking out of the room's large floor-to-ceiling window with his back to the door. Looking at the greenery everywhere in the academy, the old man seemed to be sighing. "I'm sorry to have caused you trouble," Duque said first. "Sigh." The old man sighed. "Although you have been in trouble since the first time I saw you, I still did not expect you to cause so much trouble. Do you regret it?" Duque asked with a smile. "If I really regretted it, I wouldn't even let you into this room." "Then I've decided to take a gamble." Chapter 30. No one knew what Duque had gotten from Old Mage Norton, but soon half of the mages in the academy knew that Old Man Norton had gotten a High Elven Mage Apprentice Handbook from the royal family of Kuel Salis, and that it had been used by Kale, that Sunstrider. This gave everyone more ideas about Duque's background. Duque did not care so much. He stayed in the guest house of the Magic Academy for the night. Miraculously, on that night he received a letter from Aurelia. This was a very Windrunner letter because the letter was sent by a skylark. There was a note tied to its long leg, and on it was written in the common human language. "Congratulations, Your Excellency Mage Duke Marcus." Duque scratched his head. He could not understand why this skylark could do the work of a carrier pigeon, and would come to his window in the middle of the night to wake him up. Could this skylark have become a spirit? Duque muttered to himself. He did not know when or where Aurelia had received his message, but this strange High Elven Ranger knew about it and even sent a kind blessing. Looking at the line of delicate words, Duque felt an inexplicable warmth in his heart. "It seems that I have really clung to the golden thigh of Aurelia." That being said, Duque was also happy to have a good relationship with Aurelia, so he quickly replied with the help of the system. "Thank you for your congratulations. I think we will still have a chance to meet in a few years." After writing, he read the note 3 times to make sure that there was no mistake. Duque stuffed the note into the small tube on the skylark's leg. Go back to your master." After doing this, Duque fell asleep soundly. He had no idea that a few hours later Aurelia had received his reply, and there had been a small accident. In a vast and boundless forest, the first ray of light was shining through the dense leaves. Aurelia, who had just woken up from the tree, looked at the skylark with a strange expression. "Chirp, chirp, chirp, chirp." Skylark reported to Windrunner in a melodious voice. "What? He said you became a spirit? Well, this kid has quite a good eye. Chirp, 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 chirp. What? That perverted rascal wants to hug my thigh." Aurelia's eyes widened in disbelief. Who knew that Skylark would use her wings to pat her beautiful legs? Aurelia couldn't help but look at her perfect long legs, and in the next moment her pretty face blushed for no reason. That was because she thought of the scene where Duque, that little rascal, had cast his gaze on her peaks several times. She fiercely gritted her teeth. That little perverted rascal, he really doesn't hide his thoughts. If there's a chance, I must teach him how to respect his elders. Inexplicably at the same time, Duque sneezed. What the hell? Did I catch a cold? Duque still didn't know that because of his soliloquy he had been tricked by Skylark. After washing up, Duque put on a set of blue and white mage robes with gold trim. This was a small gift from Old Mage Norton. According to Old Man Norton, if he wore the coarse linen shirt and the mage badge on the streets of Stormwind City, it would be a disgrace to all mages. After dressing neatly, looking at himself in the big mirror in the room, Duque suddenly felt that the clothes make the man. Originally a college student, Duque put on a mage robe. Although he felt that it was cumbersome, he looked like a scholar and really had a scholarly temperament. He already had a plan in mind, and just as he was about to implement it, Duque was stunned as soon as he opened the door. In the guest room outside the door he saw 3 Stormwind City soldiers standing as straight as javelins. The 2 behind them were fully armed guards, and the heroic middle-aged knight in the middle was wearing a ceremonial robe with blue patterns on a white background. There was a golden shoulder ornament like a sword tassel on his shoulder. His brown hair was neatly combed and even an ant couldn't climb on it. The knight lightly hit the left side of his chest with his right fist and bowed. "Hello, respected Sir Earth Mage Duke Marcus. I am Garcia Rodi, the commander of the Stormwind City Garrison Army's 3rd Regiment. I bring greetings from Stormwind City's commander Anduin Lothar." "Lothar looking for me?" Duque was very polite. "Hello, I am Duque. May I ask why Commander Lothar is looking for me?" "It's like this. The great King Lang and Commander Lothar found out that you are the 2nd youngest official mage in Stormwind City's history, and that you are willing to join the kingdom's mage corps. Both His Majesty and Commander Lothar are very happy. Therefore they have asked me to bring greetings from King Lang and Commander Lothar." Duque nodded. "Yes, thank them for their concern. Thank them for me." Garcia smiled and waved his hand. Immediately, a group of attendants outside the guest room filed in. "This is the letter of appointment for the official mage corps signed by His Majesty himself. Every autumn, there will be a welcoming ceremony hosted by His Majesty for the official members of the Mage Corps. This is His Majesty's consolation money for you, 100 Arathar gold coins. I heard that Sir Marcus came from the pioneer settlement outside the Elven Forest. Therefore His Majesty has specially rewarded you with a house. He has also provided you with 2 servants. If you are not satisfied with the servants, you can let me know. I am authorized to satisfy your needs to the greatest extent." Indeed, King Lang was a wise monarch. He was very clear about the value of talents. For a talented young mage from a commoner background, he definitely valued him. Seeing the undisguised envy in Garcia's eyes, Duque immediately knew that even for a new official mage, this was a reward that was above average. In the eyes of Duque, who was most in need of money, this was no different from a timely rain. It was equivalent to the first bucket of gold to push forward Duque's next plan. "Once again, thank His Majesty for the reward," said Duque as he flipped through the list that Garcia handed over. "This is," Garcia hurriedly explained, "official mages are the kingdom's important talents. Every mage should have sufficient protection when they go out. Therefore these are the follower candidates that His Majesty Lothar has carefully selected for you. Every one of them is absolutely loyal to the kingdom and their combat skills are also quite good. According to Sir Marcus's rank, you can choose up to 2 knight candidates as your exclusive followers." Duque could not help but laugh. As a PvP maniac in the game, he never thought that there would come a day when a mage who fought so fiercely would need a bodyguard. Since he had transmigrated, he would do as the Romans do. As he flipped through the list, a name suddenly made Duque's heart jump violently. Reginald Windsor. Chapter 31. At this point in time, Reginald Windsor was just an ordinary young soldier, a knight candidate. He was no different from the thousands of soldiers under Anduin Lothar who had yet to experience a real war and could be killed instantly by the orcs' axes. Even in the future, Reginald wouldn't be someone with an insane amount of power. He would be able to deal with ordinary experts, but even if he were to fight against a real hero, he would be killed in one move, let alone a fierce person like a tribal chief. He did not have outstanding leadership skills, and he did not have any outstanding achievements in the World of Warcraft before Duque traveled to this world. Even his promotion was the result of hard work. However, Reginald Windsor became the Marshal. After his death, he was crowned a hero by the people, the soldiers, and the players. Why? Because of his unlimited loyalty to Stormwind City, the largest human kingdom on the continent. This was the story of a few decades later. One day, the king of Stormwind Kingdom mysteriously disappeared. Windsor found that the nobles in Stormwind City had undergone a strange change. They began to indulge in pleasure and no longer cared about the other Stormwind Kingdom territories other than Stormwind City. As a result, people were forced to fend for themselves. In the Westfall, Jirian Stroman formed the Westfall People's Army, while in the Twilight Forest, Duke Ebenlock formed his Night's Watch to protect the people of the Night Town alone. Windsor couldn't sit still when the Blackrock Beastmen were closing in on the burning steps to the north of Lakeside Town, and there were even rumors of a black dragon appearing. He thought of his mission and took the initiative to request to go to the burning steps to lead the alliance against the Blackrock Beastmen and the Black Dragon. However, Countess Katrana Presto, who had a great influence in the council, firmly opposed his proposal. The Countess's influence even swayed the decision of the regent Bolvar for Dragon. After completely falling out with the Duchess, he went alone to the alliance camp in the burning steps. In fact, he was exiled by Stormwind City to preside over the battle against the Blackrock Orcs. However, Stormwind City never sent any reinforcements to the burning steps, and Marshal Windsor was captured by the Dark Iron Dwarves in an ambush. The Marshal could only deduce the cause and effect of everything alone in the prison. After connecting all the causes and effects, he found the biggest suspicious point was the Countess Katrana Presto, who mysteriously appeared in Stormwind City on the eve of the king's disappearance. However, he had no proof. When we found Marshal Windsor in the iron jail, he refused to come out, and cursed the Duke of Bolvar for Dragon for being a perfect fool. In fact, now that everything had been sorted out, it was actually safer to stay in the Dark Iron Dwarf's prison. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to uncover the Black Dragon's conspiracy before he died. When Duque and the players found a mysterious note in the Blackrock Abyss and handed it to Marshal Windsor, he became excited. He saw hope. He had found proof. This was the hope to break the mystery. He had the players get the 2 stone slabs and rushed out of the prison. He wanted to go to Stormwind City for the sake of Stormwind, for the sake of the Alliance, and expose the true face of Countess Katrana Presto. He entered Stormwind City, and under the witness of the 5 heroes of the Second War, he gained the trust of his former friend. Along the way, all the soldiers knelt on one knee and saluted him. He entered Stormwind's stronghold and used the stone slabs he obtained from the Dark Iron Dwarves to force out the true face of Countess Katrana Presto, the princess of the Black Dragon Onyxia. The enraged Black Dragon gave Marshal Windsor a fatal blow before flying away. Bolvar for Dragon, who had regained consciousness, single-handedly destroyed the Black Dragon guards who had taken human form around him. But none of this could save Marshal Windsor's life. A hero had finally reached the end of his life. He faced his fate with a smile and was fearless. Recalling the tear-jerking history in the game, Duque couldn't help but feel lost and thoughtful. Turning his head to look out the window, the first rays of dawn seemed to have just brushed past the tips of Duque's hair. It had only been a few days since he transmigrated, but Duque felt that this period of time had been spent in urgency and unease. Duque suddenly smiled. He used to think that if he could hear the names of Stormwind City, Karazhan, and the Dark Portal from the Warcraft movies, and hear these memorable lines, he would be very happy and satisfied. Because in those countless days and nights, he had measured every inch of the land with the feet of a silly wizard named Little Demon Fei. Even if time flew and this once world's #1 game could no longer keep up with the times, and was mocked by younger players for being outdated, he still loved her. Every night he would dream of her. When he couldn't sleep, he didn't look at the moon outside the window. Instead, he logged into the game, sat on his favorite pure white griffin, flew into the sky, and looked down at this beautiful continent. He used to think that the box office of the Warcraft movies was not good, and that there would be no more sequels. Not only did he buy 10 or 20 movie tickets, but he also organized a group with his childhood friends to watch the movie. Because she was with me for such a long and beautiful time. He used to think that this was the best way to protect her. But now, I have found a better way to protect her, Duque muttered to himself. He raised his head and looked at the rising sun. Duque knew very well that he couldn't fight against Sargeras, who had obtained Mediva's body and a huge amount of guardian magic. Even if all the forces on the continent joined forces, they might not be able to do it. The opening of the dark portal was irreversible. The sun shone on Duque's face. It was warm and Duque felt the pulse of fate again. The sun would rise day after day, and the only thing he could control was the progress of fate after the opening of the dark portal. At this point, Duque took a deep breath and waved the name list in his hand. He pointed at Reginald Windsor's name. "Hello, Captain Xianxia. I want him." Him. Xianxia's expression was a little strange. Of course, the strange reason came from Duque. He noticed that Duque's reaction became very intense when he saw Windsor's name. "Is there a problem?" Duque asked. Since his name is on the list, it means that Sir Lothar thinks that he is a reliable and capable young man. "I don't have a problem. I'm just curious why you chose him." Duque smiled and said, "Because I feel the fetters of fate." Chapter 32. Fate's fetters, in other words, were metaphysics and luck. This wasn't really a reason, so it could only be attributed to unreliable intuition. In the end, Captain Garcia didn't probe further. Since Duke was so obedient and he was doing things within the scope that Lothar had given him, there was nothing much to say. After some small talk, he gave Duke a guarantee. "Mr. Reginald Windsor will appear before you in an hour, Your Excellency." A true soldier would definitely be very disciplined. None of the soldiers trained in Stormwind City were useless. When Duque saw Windsor in the guest room, Duque couldn't help but laugh. He said he obeyed, but his face was full of dissatisfaction. The only thing missing was the words, "I hate you," engraved on his forehead. In the game, Duque could only see a gamified uncle. But when he saw Windsor in person, Duque felt that the marshal was once young. He was quite cute. Even though the marshal still had the blonde crew cut, he was still very old. How much beard could a 14-year-old boy have? A full beard was out of the question. The beard under his eagle nose was a faint golden mark. Plus his square mouth, distinctive golden eyebrows and purposely stiffened facial muscles, he looked like a poker face. The only thing that satisfied Duque was Windsor's muscles. His bulging biceps and thick thighs were full of explosive power. With those muscles he could probably fight 10 Duque at once. Of course, compared to an adult orc whose arms were thicker than a human's thigh, Windsor was still at a disadvantage in terms of strength. Duque smiled and said, "Why? Windsor, are you not satisfied with becoming my follower?" It was obvious that Windsor was a typical soldier. He was straightforward and didn't bother to hide his thoughts at all. "Yes. My dream is to become a glorious warrior of Stormwind City and fight on the front lines to protect the kingdom. I don't want to be a personal guard even if it's a powerful Sir Wizard. Plus, I don't think you're strong." As soon as Windsor finished speaking, Duque made his move. Calm and composed, allowed the next spell to be cast instantly. Frost Arrow taught the future Marshal Windsor how to be a man. Ah! The maximized Frost Arrow stunned Windsor, who was in full armor. The sturdy armor could not stop the cold air from invading his chest. If Duque hadn't held back, Windsor might have been left with a lingering illness. Several minutes later, in front of the only stove in the School of Magic, Windsor covered himself with a blanket and said, "All right, I apologize for saying, sir, you're not strong." "I accept your apology." Duque smiled and handed a cup of ginger tea to Windsor. Windsor, who had begun to acknowledge Duque, was no longer as stiff as before. "However, I still believe that becoming your follower is in conflict with my dream." "What exactly is your dream? Have you thought about it?" Windsor was a little confused. "Didn't he already say what his dream was?" Duque continued. "Actually, our dream is the same, to fight for the rise of Stormwind." Windsor's body trembled. "Do you see the shining lion emblem on your chest?" Following Duque's words, Windsor lowered his head. Duke opened his mouth and spoke tirelessly. "In the past, in order to deal with the threat of the trolls, Thoradin the Great united all the human tribes and established the Great Arathor Empire. Humans began to spread all over the continent, and new cities were built one after another. However, as it became more and more prosperous, its most powerful core began to fall apart. The lords of Riptide City began to gradually move their wealth to the prosperous northern region of Lordaeron, abandoning the barren south. Even Thoradin the Great's heir, the last child of the Arathor bloodline, was left behind in the crumbling walls of Riptide City. After many long years, a team of knights finally arrived in the Valley of the Kings. A man raised his sword in front of the knights and said, I swear on my sword that Stormwind will bear the glory of the Arathar Empire and sweep away all oppression and injustice. My people, my subjects, will follow Thoradin the Great's oath and continue to advance along the path of prosperity for humanity. If one day decay and lack of progress blinds the eyes of our descendants, then let Stormwind be destroyed in despair. 1,200 years ago, the lion flag of Stormwind was raised in this great valley. It reflected the rising sun of that day. But Windsor, tell me, why is it that 1,200 years later Stormwind's territory is still dominated by the elven forest? Why is the western wilderness followed by the word wilderness? Why does the Reedridge Mountain have the word barren in it? Windsor, for whom are you drawing your sword? Isn't it for the future, for tomorrow, for our descendants, for them to have a wider living space, to not live under the shadow of monsters and all kinds of external threats? What Stormwind needs the most is not simple-minded soldiers but a pioneer. Windsor, answer me. Are you willing to accompany me to be a pioneer? Windsor's mouth trembled. It was obvious that his immature mind was beginning to waver under the bluff of this transmigrator, Duque. However, there was still an abnormal persistence in his heart. Sir Marcus, I demand that you show me your plan, the complete plan. Windsor was sitting up. His blue eyes were filled with hesitation, and there was an uncompromising sense of helplessness. I'll show you. 15 minutes later, Duque brought Windsor to the pier of Stormwind City. Ships. From the moment he decided to develop in Stormwind City, Duque thought of ships. He could not forget that in the Warcraft movies, the Stormwind City guards in bright armor were drowned by the green sea of orcs. In complex terrain, the orcs, who had the absolute advantage in both strength and agility, were invincible. The ravines and dangerous areas that humans thought were impassable were nothing to the orcs, who were used to harsh environments. According to history, Duque was not optimistic about Stormwind City at all. If he had transmigrated into King Lang's body, he might have been saved. Unfortunately, he was not. He only had the identity of a commoner. Even with the help of the system elf, what Duque could do was still limited. That was why Duque thought of ships. Ships were needed for both retreat and future counterattacks. Chapter 33. The dock in front of him was narrow and messy. Everywhere was filled with noise and the strong smell of fish. Windsor could not help but frown. If not for the occasional fish in their meals, Windsor would not have known that Stormwind City had a dock dedicated to fishermen. The not-so-wide wooden pier extended from the sandy shore to within 40 paces of the water's edge. All he could see were small fishing boats. Many of the wooden boards on the dock had rotted and there were many holes in them. Stepping on them not only made dangerous squeaking sounds, but one could also twist their foot if they were not careful. There was only a slightly larger stone dock in the distance. That was one of the few naval ports in Stormwind City that belonged to the Royal Navy. The size of the Royal Navy was slightly better than the Mongolian Navy. In any case, they were the kind of people who would be laughed at if they dared to say, "My journey is the Sea of Stars." 3 medium-sized armed sail-class battleships. This was the entire Stormwind Kingdom's navy right now. Although they were well maintained, Duque could even see that the paint on the ships was freshly swept. There were even new recruits painting the plywood under the supervision of officers. But the impression it gave Duque was still weak. Too weak. In Duke's mind, he could not help but imagine such a scene. The endless number of orcs were like a huge green wave, roaring through every street in Stormwind City. The storm chariots in the middle of the road fought back bravely, but in front of the absolute power of the orc infantry, every line of defense was like paper. If they could not retreat in time, they would immediately be engulfed by the tide of orcs and crushed into dust. The tall and incomparably strong orcs created one terrifying earthquake after another. The Trade District, the Mage District, Stormwind Stronghold. All the buildings were easily destroyed and collapsed like dominoes. All the humans were either captured by the orcs or sacrificed to Stormwind City. All the land routes had been blocked by the orc army, and the only escape route in Stormwind was the sea. Tiras, one of the 7 kingdoms of the humans, had sent a huge fleet to help Stormwind evacuate its citizens and troops, but due to the small size of the dock, they were unable to increase the speed of their retreat. This was the first major disaster in the history of the world of Azeroth in 1,000 years, all because of a bad dock. Therefore, after Storm City was rebuilt for the second time, Storm City gained a huge dual-use port, Stormport. However, right now, this was just a fisherman's wharf that wasn't even marked on the city's map. Duque was disappointed. Not to mention the fact that he couldn't get a boat in such a short time. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to use it because the dock was too small. Also, it was a problem for him to have too many ships. You're just a little magician. What are you trying to do with a fleet that's even more ridiculous than the royal fleet? There must be a suitable reason. In his mind, Duque quickly adjusted his plan. Go. We'll go to the shipyard first. With a doubtful Windsor in tow, Duque arrived at the small shipyard beside Stormwind's dock. The shipyard wasn't big. A bare-chested old man with a hunched back that showed no signs of aging saw Duque walk over. He was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted and bowed. After all, a young magician with a magician's robe and an official magician's insignia, and a young knight in military uniform, such a combination was definitely rare in this place. Good morning, respected Sir Magician. May I ask how Jackson can help you? How big of a ship can you build here? I mean the biggest. Duque directly pointed at the royal fleet docked in the military port. Can you build that big? Old Jackson was stunned for a moment and immediately smiled bitterly. How is that possible? Even the Stormwind warships are custom-built from coal tiras. We can only build fishing boats or cargo ships that are a few dozen tons. That's good. I want 10. Duque decided on the spot. As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. Not just old Jackson, even Windsor who followed him was dumbfounded. Wait. Windsor dragged Duckla out of the shipyard and to a place where no one was around. Sir Marcus, the money is yours. I have no intention of asking you how you use it. But if you are going to invest in shipbuilding, then even if I am just a knight candidate who wholeheartedly practices martial arts, I must warn you that you are going to lose. Oh. A thought-provoking expression appeared on Duque's face. Why do you say that? For the sake of the wise His Majesty Lang, please dispel this terrible idea. I know that your profession as a wizard requires a lot of money, and I also know that most of the existing money-making industries in Stormwind City are occupied by aristocrats, but you can't waste money on ships. Windsor waved his arms exaggeratedly, using his body language to express the seriousness of the matter. Go on. Only the poor are willing to eat fishy and smelly fish. Aristocrats don't eat it at all. Similarly, there is no point in building a small cargo ship of several dozen tons. There is not even a decent town in the coastal waters where such a small ship can go. Who are you going to sell the goods to? As long as you leave the coastal waters, there will be damn Nagas and fishmen everywhere. Duque still smiled without saying anything. Windsor became more and more anxious. It's not that no merchant ships will come. In fact, only the Cultira's merchant fleet comes once a year, and they stop at the military port. They come to dump the goods of Lord Darren that cannot be sold elsewhere to Stormwind City's aristocrats. When Duque heard this, he immediately understood. At this moment, Stormwind was still a poor and remote place in the eyes of the continent's major human kingdom's aristocrats. In fact, if it were not for the various invasions in later generations, as well as the undead Scourge Legion that almost destroyed the human kingdoms north of Stormwind City, who would have expected that Stormwind City would become the strongest and safest shelter for humans? Duque, listen to me. Unless you can earn the money of those aristocrats, no side business will be able to satisfy the money you need to practice magic. This is also why so many mages become court mages or exclusive mages of the aristocrats. Duque suddenly smiled brightly. Windsor, why don't we make a bet? Bet again. You're going to lose so much money. Indeed, whether it is for my personal training or the needs of development, I need a lot of money. Then let's bet on whether I can earn 500 gold coins in 3 months or not. If I can't, then it will prove my level and I will let you go back to Lothar as your knight candidate. Windsor suddenly had an ominous feeling. What if you win? First of all, I will call you Reggie from now on. Your name is too long and troublesome. Then you will follow me from now on. I will tell you who is the hope and future of Stormwind. Chapter 34. Old Jackson, it's still the same. I want 10 of them to meet the standards for offshore transportation and fishing. As big as you can make them. When can I get them? Duque's words gave Old Jackson a shock. He did not expect that this young mage who seemed to have never seen the world really wanted to build a ship. It would be a waste not to take the money that was delivered to his doorstep. Old Jackson sighed. I don't have that much material here. I only have 5 keels for new ships. Any more and I will have to spend time looking for materials. If you only need 5 new 30-ton ships, I can guarantee that they will be ready for you within a month. Each one will cost 50 gold coins. A 30-ton ship was actually very small. Converting to the size that Duque was familiar with, it was only 15 meters long and 3 meters wide. It was only slightly bigger than a dinghy. Alright, it's settled. Here's the deposit. After saying that, Duque immediately took out the 100 gold coins that Lothar gave him in the morning. There's no need for that much. If it's use or mage, we only need a 10% deposit. Then help me recruit some sailors for the rest. Old Jackson's wrinkled face showed a hesitant expression. He bit his lips and finally spoke. There are plenty of lads at the dock who have nothing better to do. It's not impossible for me to help you recruit some. They are all good lads. Even though they are good swimmers and have good character, they are not sailors. I can't agree to let them do high-risk business. Duque smiled confidently. It's fine, I'm just fishing and transporting some goods that are presentable. On the contrary, I hope that the lads I recruit will be clean if I find out that anyone dares to hide some goods. Calm and composed. Flame blast. A fireball the size of a water tank formed in Duque's hands in an instant, flew out and exploded in the sea beside the shipyard. Accompanied by a loud boom, a large pillar of water exploded. Windsor, who was at the side, was completely petrified. Duque actually held back this morning. If such a large fireball hit me, wouldn't I turn into charcoal in an instant? The people on the boat, including old Jackson, all had their legs shaking and trembling non-stop. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to threaten you. But what I'm about to do next is really important. I don't want any bad fellas among my men. Duque nodded and left with Windsor. Duque did not return to the house that Lothar gave him. Instead, he went to the guest house of the magic school and borrowed a pen and paper from old Norton. Spreading out the A2-sized piece of paper on the table, Duque picked up the quill that needed to be dipped in ink to write and activated the system assist. The system notification rang. Beep. Descriptive geometry and the drawing software AutoCAD have been detected in the host's memory. System optimization and sorting. Drawing assistance function completed. Under Windsor's astonished gaze, Duque used less than 10 minutes to draw a profile of the ship and handed it to Windsor. Keep this blueprint well. This is 500 gold coins for travel expenses. I need you to make a trip to Cultivation. Bring the entire family of the craftsmen who are capable of building a ship of this level back to Stormwind City. If I'm not back by then, place him in the house that Sir Lothar gave me. Windsor wouldn't be able to understand the blueprints. But he could barely recognize the name of the original owner of the gold note that was recognized by the Seven Kingdoms and could be exchanged in the main cities of the Seven Kingdoms was the venerable old wizard Norton. Hiss, Windsor gasped. It turned out that whether he was there or not, Duque was going to do something big. Windsor asked, Then what are you going to do during this time, Sir Marcus? Of course I'm going to level up. It's to practice magic. At the same time I'm going to make preparations for this investment. The world of wizards was not something a soldier could meddle in. Despite his doubts, Windsor was grateful for Duque's trust in him. After all, in his opinion, 500 gold coins was already a huge sum of money. After all, this amount of money was enough for a small family to live a lifetime of prosperity. Unexpectedly, Duque did not even ask a single question and directly handed him this huge sum of money. Well, please rest assured that I, Reginald Windsor, will not let you down. On this side, Duque hurriedly returned to his home in Stormwind City and left Stormwind City. Lothar really valued him. His home was located in the garden area. According to the standards of the pre-transmigration era, it was already a villa. At least there were 2 small gardens of about 10 square meters in front and 1 at the back. Before the transmigration, if this was in a first-tier city, it would definitely be an expensive property worth millions. But in Stormwind City, compared to the mansions of those nobles, this was really a very ordinary standard. Duque did not feel at ease here. Since it was a house that was destined to be destroyed by the flames of war, there was no need to worry about it. However, Duque's investment in a very short time reached the ears of another group of interested people. When Fame Brando heard the news of Duque's investment in shipbuilding, he laughed on the spot. That idiot actually built a ship? Stormwind City has no specialties to sell at all. We collect so much tax every year, but we can only be at the mercy of those profiteers, Kultiras, or the even more damned goblins. Alright, I'll see Duke lose so much that he doesn't even have his pants left. The Brando family were not stupid. When Lothar vaguely asked the Brando family about their feud with Duke, the Brando family sternly warned Fame Brando. Before you understand the situation clearly, you are forbidden from contacting that Duke in any form, whether directly or indirectly. Otherwise, if you offend Lothar, the entire Brando family will be destroyed. For the time being, they could not do anything to Duque, but it did not mean that they could not curse Duque in the worst way possible. In fact, it was not only Brando. Even in the Academy of Magic, there were many mages who looked at Duque's actions with disdain. From their point of view, for a noble mage to personally run a business was a disgrace to the profession of a mage. Even the most neutral mage would feel that Duque was not doing his proper work and was wasting his talent and time. After all, the ocean of magic was so vast, and the human lifespan was too short compared to the amount of time needed to spend in the field of magic. But these things Duque did not care. After hiring a carriage and a team of mercenaries, Duque spent a full 5 days crossing the elven forest, and arrived at the Western Wilderness, southwest of Stormwind City. Western Wilderness. I'm coming. Chapter 35. After exiting Stormwind City, heading south, crossing Mirror Lake and West Springs Stronghold, and turning west was the boundary of the Western Wilderness. Sitting in the bumpy carriage, Duque gazed at the scenery outside the window. Outside the window was an eternally clear sky. Even the wind carried a sense of desolation. His vision was filled with yellow soil, yellow fields, and yellow earth. The Western Wilderness had the same comfortable temperature as Islewin, but the strong winds from the sea and twilight forest kept blowing past. If not for the plump grains in the fields, Duque would have thought this was a barren land. In fact, perhaps due to the underground river, the land here was quite fertile. Unfortunately, there were many terrible monsters in the Western Wilderness, and the one that annoyed Duque the most was the vultures that filled the sky. He saw with his own eyes that a mercenary he used as a token guard was attacked. A black shadow flashed across the sky, drawing a line of death in the air. In the blink of an eye, the shadow of death descended from the sky. It was foreseeable that in a few seconds, the back of the young mercenary's head would explode into a rotten watermelon. The young mercenary's equipment was decent. He wore a standard metal helmet that the Stormwind City guards had abandoned. However, such a ferocious attack was not something an unprepared recruit could defend against. The impact alone was enough to break his cervical vertebrae. It was not hard to imagine that he would die in an instant. At that moment, the entire caravan froze in fear. At least 6 or 7 mercenaries who witnessed the scene were horrified. Their leader, Makarov, was even more horrified. However, the vultures were so fast that they did not even have time to pull out their bows and arrows. At this critical moment, a hand reached out from the window of the carriage. Duque's hand. That's right, it was the combination of Calm Mind and Flame Blast. This move was more than enough to beat up ordinary soldiers and humans. However, as a directional spell in the real world of Azeroth, there was no such thing as locking onto a target and being sure to hit it. It relied on the mage's own judgment. Prediction and whatnot was a very mysterious thing in and of itself. This thing relied on experience and intuition. Due to his limited mana and the fact that Duque couldn't find an effective way to replenish his mana, Duque didn't fully understand his Flame Blast. In fact, Duque also instinctively felt that according to the flying speed of the fireball, it would probably be near that area. However, after Duque's dynamic vision captured the existence that was as fast as a gust of wind, only 0.5 seconds later, a feeling of bliss came to his mind. Perhaps the vulture could choose to roll left or right. However, Duque did not think that this feathered beast had such a high IQ. Therefore, Duque chose to make an advanced calculation. The dozen or so guards had yet to recover from the shock of their own people being attacked when they suddenly realized that the important person they were protecting had made a move. Whoosh! With a strong light and a burning sensation, a huge fireball flew out of the window of the carriage, dragging a long trail of flames behind it. It shot straight in front of Vulture. Good. Ah! The mercenaries' undulating cries were a good reflection of the development of the situation. At the very beginning, they were happy that Duque had made a move. They immediately realized that as the overlord of the sky in the Western Wilderness, This vulture, which was called the corpse shredder bird by most of the western wilderness farmers, had extraordinary mobility. The corpse shredder bird flapped its left wing hard, and the water tank-sized fireball was likely to pass by the beast that directly attacked a living person. The target of its attack was still the same. Every mercenary had an indescribable regret on their faces. However, the next moment, the young hand that stretched out of the carriage window suddenly snapped its fingers. The huge fireball seemed to have been gripped by an invisible hand. Bang! With a loud explosion, the fireball suddenly exploded beside the corpse shredder bird. Moreover, it was not an omnidirectional explosion, but a kind of one-way explosion, perfectly avoiding the young mercenary's side. Faced with the scattering of flames that were even denser than the torrential rain, with a croak, that hateful feathered beast instantly turned into a raging torch, falling from the sky in a dejected manner. From joy to disappointment and then to ecstasy, the mercenaries' hearts were like a roller coaster. Seeing the corpse shredder bird fall, they raised the weapons in their hands. Long live Sir Marcus. It was only then that the young lad who was almost killed by the ambush suddenly realized that he had already circled the gates of hell. Listening to the enthusiastic cheers, Duque was slightly stunned. He was willing to work hard to change the fate of Stormwind, but this did not mean that he would become a saint who blessed the common people and saved everyone. Duque had never thought of himself as a saint. For him, rather than saying that this was a rescue, it was better to say that this was just a practice. The moment he made his move, the action was already ahead of his thoughts. Now, Duque's actions were acknowledged by the mercenaries and were rewarded. The mercenary leader, Makarov, rode his skinny horse and pulled the young man who had just escaped death. "Thank you very much, great Sir Marcus. You just saved my son." "Son?" "Yes, my only son, Philip. This is his first mission. His mother and I were strongly against it. Sigh, fortunately he's fine. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to go back and see his mother." Makarov's voice choked as he said this. He pressed down on Philip's head and made his son bow to Duque. "It's good that you're fine. Let's continue our journey." To be honest, Duque did not want to have too much to do with Makarov and the rest. After all, he was only using this group of mercenaries as a cover. He did not want to implicate them because of his matters. Seeing that Duque was a little cold on the outside but warm on the inside, Makarov was not annoyed. After all, Duque had just demonstrated his nobility with his actions. Makarov bowed. "Actually, it's like this. I accidentally obtained a magic note. There are words that we do not understand engraved on it. But I think that it should be of help to you, sir. If you can accept it, that would be for the best." "Well then, thank you in advance." Duque did not act pretentiously and took the note that looked like a small notebook. The money that old Norton gave him would eventually run out one day. When it came to magic, the more the better, the better. But when he took the note and opened it, he was dumbfounded. It was not that the system elf could not decipher or learn it, but rather that the system prompt was a little mysterious. "Congratulations, host. You have obtained the level 0 spell, Mage Hand, the level 2 spells, Darson's Quenching Prison, and Darson's Blazing Furnace." Duque had played World of Warcraft for so long that he dared to swear on his life that these 3 spells did not exist in the list of spells of Azeroth's wizards. Chapter 36. Duque's life was worthless. Duque's moral integrity was not worth much at all. Duque's oath still had some effect. Duque felt a tremor from the deepest part of his heart. After entering the world of Azeroth, he once again felt the prank from fate. The 4 Windrunner sisters and whatnot were already ridiculous enough. Now even the magic system had a strong sense of crossover. However, magic was magic. Almost at the moment when Duque opened the note, he had already deeply felt the mysterious resonance between himself and these spells. It was like a sense of recognition, a more circumstantial way of thinking coming into his mind. At that moment, it was as if the definition of mage that had been solidified in the game had the most eye-catching chemical reaction. Back in Duque's Viry, mages only represented high-attack long-range artillery, the strongest control profession. However, at this moment, there seemed to be the brightest light illuminating his mind, and in this light, a door opened. He seemed to have passed through this door and saw many things that were beyond the framework of his mind. Unconsciously, a list of spells appeared in his mind. All the spells were reclassified. defense, spell, prophecy, enchantment, evocation, illusion, necromancy, transformation, and general. There were a total of 9 categories. Among them, most of the categories were still hazy and pitch black. But this, after all, represented more possibilities. This was not an illusion that only existed for the briefest moment and immediately dissipated, but a kind of development that broke the rules of Azeroth. Even this list of spells could be repeatedly brought up in the field of vision through the system elf. Duque also discovered one thing. Whether it was Flame Blast, or Frost Arrow, at the beginning, or Darson's Frigid Prison, and other spells, it seemed that the spells that were related to him before he transmigrated would all be greatly enhanced. For the spells related to fire and ice, the large number of thermodynamic calculation formulas that popped up in the system prompt was enough. Even Mage Hand, which should have been categorized as a level 0 cantrip, was greatly enhanced. The reason for the strengthening made Duque speechless. A lot of motion capture technology has been detected in the host's memory, inputting and improving the corresponding laws. Preset thought transmission nodes in Hand of Magic. Hand of Magic is expected to increase flexibility by 180% and strength by 230%. Your Hand of Magic has advanced. Level unknown, estimated to be over level 2. Before Duque transmigrated, the most well-known use of motion capture was in filming. By attaching dozens of trackers to the key parts of an actor's face, the muscle movements of the entire face could be converted into data that could be processed by a computer to measure the size of an object, as well as to determine the location and orientation of objects in a physical space. Unexpectedly, this could be reversed by the system elf. Duque snapped his fingers in front of Makarov. Pa! A magic palm the size of a human hand appeared out of thin air in front of one of the mercenaries. It was glowing with a pale blue radiance. This strange phenomenon startled the mercenaries. Although they were horrified, they quickly raised their swords and sabers. However, they quickly came to their senses and found the source of their shock. The ghost hand, floating in the air, had the exact same movement as Duque's right hand. They finally understood that it was released by Duque. Duque's face bloomed with a gentle smile. Makarov, thank you for your generous gift. I owe you one. Makarov quickly recovered from his shock. No. Respected Sir Marcus, my son is my priceless treasure. If you are satisfied with my gift in return, that would be the greatest consolation for me. That was often the case when it came to favors. After this exchange, the indifferent and estranged relationship between employer and employee quickly warmed up because of this small interlude. Under Duque's insistence, Makarov was willing to drop the Sir and call Duque Marcus in private. Before he knew it, it was already night. After coming to this world, Duque was still not used to all sorts of things. Everything in this world was so primitive. After nightfall, there was almost no light. There was no moonlight, and only the dim yellow of the western wilderness could be vaguely seen within the range of the firelight. The caravan set up camp on the leeward side of a small hill. After dinner, there were only 1 or 2 night watchmen left in the temporary camp to drive away the wild beasts. Everyone fell asleep. In this quiet and dark environment, Duque should have fallen asleep very quickly, but the strange and dazzling scenery around him made Duque unable to fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. Duque began to review the few spells he had. At this moment, Duque suddenly heard a conversation between 2 night watchmen. Karen, did you hear anything? Something seems to be approaching. Almost at the same time, Duque heard a prompt from the system elf. Host. Detected a large number of dangerous life signals. The enemy is determined to be a null. Number 50, 60, 100, 170. In the darkness in the distance, countless short shadows were silently approaching this place at high speed. Enemy attack. The night watchman's mournful and loud cry woke all the sleeping mercenaries up. Oh, hell, it's Hog. Heavens, it's really Hog. The name Hog seemed to have a terrifying magic that made people tremble. People who grew up in the elven forest would often be scared awake by the cries of gnolls. Because no matter how powerful humans were, no matter whether they had actually become the masters of the elven forest or not, they could not forget the nightmare of the elven forest, Hog. This giant gnoll wandering in the south of West Spring's stronghold brought them dark memories. Legend has it that the name Hog was just a code name given to this or this branch of gnolls by the humans. People did not know how long the gnolls lived, but the people of the elven forest always called the leader of the gnolls, the largest one, Hog. Legend has it that Hog's body was twice the size of an ordinary gnoll, and that his claws could easily tear infantry shields in half, and that his strong legs could easily catch up with poor adventurers who tried to escape. But these were just legends because no one could really face Hog and come back alive. If one were to list the most famous and powerful villains near Stormwind City, Hog had already occupied the headlines of Stormwind City's bulletin board. Almost all the adventurers who were tempted by the bounty set by Stormwind City had died under his feet. Now Hog had come with his army of gnolls. Chapter 37. Darkness brought about a primal fear. The fear of darkness was imprinted in the hearts of humans since the time when they ate raw meat and drank blood. It was now fermenting in everyone's hearts. Every mercenary felt a bitter taste in their mouths. Damn it! Did Hog bring his entire gnoll army? Aren't they only active in the elven forest? Why would they cross the river and come to the western wilderness? The people of this era had night blindness due to the lack of sea products in their diet. Even with the light of the fire, they still looked like they were covered in shadows. Makarov suddenly laughed dryly. Oh, think on the bright side. The sheriff of Goldshire in the elven forest, Zhou Xian, has been waiting night after night. He's waiting for a hunter who can bring back evidence of Hog's death. If we can kill Hog and bring his huge claws to the people of Goldshire, we'll get double the reward. Boss, we're dead for sure. Makarov's joke did not boost their morale. Have you forgotten who we still have? Makarov's reminder suddenly boosted everyone's morale. That's right. We still have Sir Duke Marcus. Thinking of Duque's extravagant and unimaginable magic during the day, everyone felt as if they had drunk a glass of strong alcohol, their bodies surging with warmth. They could not help but put part of their attention on the carriage. At this moment, Duque's expression was not good. He really did not expect to welcome his first real battle at this time. And the biggest problem was that the style of these gnolls had changed. When old Norton first escorted Duque's 3 apprentices to Stormwind City, Duque had also encountered gnolls. At that time, gnolls were just monsters with strong limbs but short statures. Other than their numbers, they had nothing good about them. But now it was completely different. Through the system Elf, Duque was able to see the gnoll's body shape. Duque paid attention to the data given by the system. An adult gnoll is about 1.9 meters tall and weighs about 120 kilograms. After the system Elf filled the targets with light, Duque noticed that these humanoid monsters had greenish-gray or dark green skin and aardwolf-like heads that were 3 times larger than their brethren. As for the giant monster that was more than 4 meters tall, it had the following description. Mutated elite monster Hog. Data unknown, detected unusual increase in strength. Danger assessment is high danger. It is strongly recommended that the host retreat. Seeing this, even Duke couldn't help but let out a hiss and suck in a breath of cold air. What the hell was this? This was completely against the rules. 4 meters tall. Wasn't this the template of an ogre? Speaking of which, Uncle Hog, is there a need to jump out of your territory to chase after me? Before Duque traveled to this world, Hog was known as the new assassin in World of Warcraft. In the original version of the game, almost all the new players in Goldshire Town who received the wanted quest, Hog Must Die, would foolishly run off to kill Hog. As a result, the players experienced what an elite monster was for the first time. 1, 2, 3, 4. The newbie players killed by Hog could line up twice around the Earth's equator. Of course, this was an exaggeration. But it was an indisputable fact that the players were taught a lesson by Uncle Hog. In the players' mouths, whenever they talked about Hog, they would add the title of Uncle Hog. Therefore Hog became Uncle Hog. When Duque passed through the elven forest, he didn't encounter any gnolls. Perhaps it was because Makarov deliberately chose to be close to the West Spring fortress guarded by the Stormwind guards, which made Duque forget about Hog. In the end, Hog didn't act like a tyrant in the elven forest. Instead, he crossed the border and chased after him here. This situation made Duque a little confused. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The huge figure passed through the distant fire that was used as a warning. In the light of the fire, Hog's terrifying figure seemed even larger and more oppressive. In the light of the fire, Hog's dog-like head could be seen with long yellow teeth and blood-red eyes. Fluffy black and yellow fur covered his body. Originally, gnolls were used to taking the fur of cattle and other livestock and making simple leather armor. Of course, they also liked to take all kinds of weapons from attacking humans, so gnolls often had a variety of weapons and armor. Hog was different. Perhaps it was because his body was too large that he didn't have any weapons or armor. Or maybe it was because he had just become this huge not too long ago, so Hog showed Duke and the mercenaries a body without any armor, full of explosive power and unbelievably thick fur. Oh my god. Did he attack a post or West Spring Fortress? The mercenaries saw several long swords stuck in Hog's body. The standard swords of Stormwind City's human guards were like toothpicks on his body. Perhaps it was because Hog wanted to show off his strength or because his mind was a little crazy, but he didn't even pull out the swords that should be causing him some pain. What he held in his right hand was probably a flagpole, because this flagpole would require an adult human to wrap their arms around it, and there was a small section of Stormwind City's flag on it. A woo, it sounded a little like a dog's bark but also a little like a wolf's howl. Hog let out a threatening roar, announcing his existence to the entire team. In just a short while, Hog's subordinates had already surrounded them from all sides. At the same time, Makarov and the rest finally heard the heavenly voice from within the carriage. "Get closer to me and stay within the range of the blizzard?" The mercenaries understood what it meant to get closer. But within the range of the blizzard. The mercenaries didn't quite understand. In the next second, when the roaring gnolls charged forward with all kinds of weapons, and they could even smell their foul breath, the mercenaries understood. A beautiful voice. The essence of a voice shouldn't be beautiful. But right now, the sound of thousands of icicles falling from the sky, the sound that allowed Makarov and the others to escape death, suddenly gave the word, sound, a magnificent prefix. The icicles fell on the ground tens of meters wide, and the gnolls' attack faltered momentarily. The barbaric tide of monsters still wanted to break through the seemingly weak defensive formation of Makarov and the others, but they were quickly caught in their trap. Chapter 38. The gnolls that were charging at the front somehow fell to the ground. Their low IQ could not understand what it meant to increase the damage. The outermost layer was indeed fluttering snow, but the slowness was just an illusion to deceive the eyes of these low IQ creatures. The closer to the center, the denser the icicles became, from the size of a thumb to the size of a goose egg and even the size of a brick. These icicles whistled as they fell from the sky, and some of them even created strong air turbulence. The falling icicles shattered on the ground, and the cold ice powder flew all over the sky. The bone-chilling cold air numbed their nerves, and they did not even notice that the icicles that fell on their heads were not small hailstones, but long icicles that looked like icicles. A few of the gnolls that did not have eyes were smart enough to raise their small leather shields and rush through the killing zone created by the ice storm, but they did not end up any better than the previous ones. One by one, they were pierced into sieves by the icicles that fell from the sky. Makarov and the others held their breath, nervously holding their shields in front of them and holding their swords as they stared at the attack of the gnolls. What they saw was the gnolls charging at them under Hog's command, and then they fell, and again, and again. It was as if the gnolls that were charging at them were not terrifying monsters that could kill them but fat pigs that were sent to the slaughterhouse. Everyone watched as the ice storm surrounded them in a ring shape. It did not affect them at all, but according to the intensity of the attack of the gnolls, the icicles became denser and thinner. It was as if the person in the carriage would run out of mana at any time, as if this exaggerated offensive-defensive circle would collapse at any time, but that did not happen. Every time the density of the icicles decreased, as if they could not kill even one more gnoll, their mana seemed to be magically replenished, and the density of the icicles immediately returned to its original state. Under Hog's angry roar, the gnolls tried to retreat many times, and they braced themselves to attack Makarov and the others again, but without exception they became frozen corpses in the ice storm. From the beginning to the end, everyone could not help but feel a little numb. It was as if the people that were charging at this defensive circle were not the subordinates of the nightmare of the elven forest, but a group of sheep abandoned by the shepherds to endure the snowstorm. Someone muttered about how much bounty they could get from so many gnolls' claws. Makarov's son's mood was even more youthful as he extended his sword to test the might of the ice storm that was just inches away from him. No, Makarov's expression changed. He could almost imagine his son turning into an ice sculpture like those stupid gnolls. After all, in his eyes, even those sky wizards who had been famous for many years, or even Morningstar wizards, did not have such fine control abilities. Unexpectedly, with a stretch of his sword, the encirclement of the ice tempest actually bulged outwards. Hey! Before he could be proud of himself, his father suddenly pulled him back. Dad, I'm fine. The young man's eyes widened in disbelief. If his father hadn't pulled him back, he would have been a corpse by now. It was just a distance of a few fingers, but the blade of a super-huge axe made of flagpole tied to stones almost brushed past his face. The huge axe swept up gravel and icicles that swept across his forehead, leaving behind a few streaks of blood. He could not imagine what would have happened if he had taken this attack head-on. His head and neck, as well as his helmet that should have had defensive properties, would have been blown apart in an instant. He would have become an unknown object that was neither flesh nor metal. Hiss! Looking at the shocking attack that split apart the ice tempest, almost every mercenary sucked in a breath of cold air. Looking at Hog's terrifying figure that bore through the sky full of icicles and forcefully broke through the ice tempest's encirclement to kill his way into the defensive circle, anyone would wonder if there was a human that could match this monster. The answer was, there was. The carriage door that was never opened other than when Duque pooped opened with a creak. The blue and white mage robe with the emblem of an earth mage was the most eye-catching thing in this moonless night. The violent ice tempest suddenly changed its direction. It no longer fell from above, but with the carriage as the center, it poured out diagonally. Arg! The screams of the gnolls reached their peak in an instant. But everyone knew that this was not the end. Many gnolls had died and many more were injured. However, at least 40% of the gnolls were still intact. Duque, who had not spoken a word since the start of the battle, put his hand on Makarov's shoulder and said, Makarov, while I'm fighting Hog, you and your men should try to break out of the encirclement. If anyone makes it back to Stormwind City alive, tell Lord Norton that Duque has betrayed his trust. Makarov shook his head. Let's not talk about whether people will hire mercenaries who abandon their employers. Just abandoning the benefactor who saved my son's life is enough to disqualify me from being a human. Makarov and the mercenaries behind him had the same expression. Their eyes were filled with the same determination to fight to the death. Duque was silent for a second. Then you and your men take care of yourselves. In the next moment, Duke's deep black eyes met with Hog's scarlet eyes, which were not far away. Even though they did not speak the same language, they both understood that this would be a battle between king and king. Whoever won, the rest of the enemy's forces would collapse in an instant. Ha, 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 ha. Hog's thick nose twitched as he panted heavily. The thirst for blood stimulated his senses. An arm that was even thicker than Duke's waist suddenly burst out, and the explosive muscle strength was revealed in an instant. Hog easily lifted the nearly 6-meter-long self-made axe onto his shoulder. In an instant his domineering aura overflowed. Duque stood up proudly. At this time the gnolls who had been defeated rushed up again. The gnolls had two tactics, scatter or swarm. What would happen to Makarov and the rest? This was not something that Duque could take care of. He focused all his attention on Hog. If it was Duque who just came out of Stormwind City, he would definitely not be Hog's match. Hog's mistake was that he let his lackeys go first. Duque did not know that experience points existed in the world of Azeroth. It was a little inappropriate to call it experience points, because the system notification clearly stated, "Congratulations," because the host used the compound spell, Ice Storm, composed of Darsong's Cold Prison, and Blizzard, to kill the gnoll. You have refined 110 soul force from the gnoll's body. You can use this power to expand your magic circuits. Chapter 39. As a veteran player, as a university student who could not tell the difference between a game and life after transmigrating to a different world, Duque automatically thought of it as the experience points needed to level up. In terms of practical effects, there were similar places. You used 2,500 points of soul power to open up the third magic circuit. Your intelligence value increased by 5 points, your mana value increased by 50 points, and your spell strength increased by an unknown amount. Killing and arson had been a shortcut to getting rich since ancient times. Gnolls were also people, and Duque did not hesitate to use the soul power brought by these gnolls to jump from a level 1 earth mage to a level 4 mage in one breath. How strong was a level 4 mage? Duque did not know. Instinctively, he felt that his mana pool was still a small bucket that would stop after 8 or 10 frost arrows. He had imagined countless times that Uncle Hog would first give away all his minions as experience points, then laugh 3 times and say, "Since you can kill all my minions, you are indeed qualified to fight with me." Finally, he would be taught a lesson by the upgraded Duque with a big fireball. Unfortunately, Hog's reckless and impulsive personality ruined Duque's dream. Hog, this guy actually went straight up with the frost storm. Didn't they say that the boss would appear at the end? It was not scientific. Well, whether it was scientific or not, it was meaningless. Staring at the matchstick-like human mage that he hated the most in the convoy, Hog rushed over. Fast. So fast. Although Hog was huge, his speed did not slow down at all. On the contrary, under Hog's muscular hind legs that could almost be described as majestic, its enormous body suddenly became as forceful as a bullet train speeding at high speed. The hill-like figure rapidly enlarged in Duque's field of vision. Calm and composed, flame burst. This continuous skill that Duque had used almost every time since he transmigrated, this time, it failed. Completely without any sense of justice, Hog brandished his giant axe, and with a gorgeous and explosive sweep he actually split Duque's big fireball horizontally in half. After the core of the fireball was destroyed, the rest of the fireball turned into flames that struggled on their deathbed. They twitched twice in the night sky before disappearing. Holy **T. Duque gaped at the unscientific scene in front of him. Then death came. Hog, who was closing in at high speed, didn't even wave his stone axe, which was full of destructive power. He only gave Duque a contemptuous glance and then kicked Duque's chest. Puff! An extremely muffled sound came from Duque's chest. In the next second, Duque was sent flying like a bag of trash. His blue and white robes drew a beautiful arc in the night sky as he fell not far from Makarov, who was still fighting fiercely in the middle of the battlefield. This scene shocked everyone in the mercenary group. Toway. Isn't Sir Marcus the strongest? How did he die? Sir Marcus. Someone shouted. No healing potions. Who's going to give me healing potions? It's over. His chest has completely caved in and his internal organs are probably mud. He's definitely dead. The mercenaries were in a mess. No one had expected that the mysterious and powerful young mage Duke, whom they had been getting along with for the past few days, would be killed by Hog in a single move. But thinking about it, Hog was the nightmare of the elven forest. If they couldn't deal with him, why would they hope that the stronger Duque could? It turned out that killing the powerful Hog was just an illusory dream from start to finish. Makarov abandoned his opponent and almost shot forward, picking up Duque, who was already gasping for breath. He remembered how Duque saved his son and remembered Duque's smile. Makarov roared towards the sky. Everyone attack. Avenge Sir Duke Marcus. Avenge, avenge. The roars of the mercenaries resounded. Hog, who was more than 10 steps away, did not immediately rush forward. His hyena mouth was wide open, and the crisscrossed sharp teeth could be seen under the light of the fire. He was actually laughing. Laughing at the group of weak humans who overestimated themselves. Laughing at the struggle of these puny humans. It was not just Hog, even the surrounding gnolls let out proud barks. Just when the mercenaries thought that Duque was dead, Makarov suddenly realized that the weight in his arms had mysteriously disappeared. Go. Duque, who should have been dead, rushed towards Hog, a cold blue and white radiance blossoming in his hands. Makarov and the rest were stunned. They had seen Duque's condition earlier, and he was in a state where he was on the verge of death. Duque actually dragged his body like this to buy time for them to evacuate. Unknowingly, the mercenaries' eyes were brimming with tears. This was a heroic scene. They watched as Duque released another frost arrow. Hog seemed to have been caught off guard by Duque's attack. He did not manage to dodge the frost arrow, and his entire left arm was covered in frost. However, that was all. Hog let out an angry roar when he regained his senses, and the muscles in his right arm bulged as he swung his axe again. This time the axe did not hit anything. Duque seemed to have twisted his body at the last moment and avoided the fate of being split in half. Duque was not much better off. When he was sent flying, the mercenaries could even see parts of Duque's arm that had been smashed into smithereens, and the flesh on the surface of his body was scattered everywhere. It was a tragic scene. For these mercenaries who did not know each other just a few days ago, Duque, the future hope of the kingdom, an incomparably noble mage, had actually shed his blood for them. They watched as Duque's figure, which was not tall, fell tragically in the fire. They were furious. Duque. Kill. Kill them mercilessly. Kill these bastards. Charge. Avenge Sir Marcus. The furious mercenaries began their desperate charge. They even abandoned the shields that they relied on to protect their lives. While letting out angry roars, they madly chased after the tall gnolls. The gnolls, who obviously had the advantage in numbers, were the ones being chased. A woo, Hog roared, and suddenly the gnolls seemed to have found their backbone. They immediately turned around and surrounded him again. Yes. As long as Hog did not die, these fierce and timid gnolls would fight like the bravest berserkers to the last man. However, at this time, Duque unexpectedly stood up again. The mercenaries cried. Men did not easily shed tears, but these mercenaries, who had long been accustomed to life and death, had tears on their faces. Chapter 40. Are we really worthy of Sir Marcus going this far? They thought. I didn't expect him to have the heart of a warrior despite being a mage. Heaven is on the left and a warrior is on the right. He's too brave. Too fearless. Surrounded by the swarm of gnolls, Duque only had time to cast a flame burst before falling down. Next, the mercenaries began to feel very strange. Duque stood up again. Fuck you, Hog. Flame burst. Duque fell down again. This time Duque was directly split in two by an axe. Duque stood up again. I will kill all 18 generations of gnolls. Again and again. Under Hog's fierce counterattack, Duque fell down again and stood up again and again without doing anything, just cursing and throwing fireballs at the huge Hog's face. Even a fool could see that although Hog was brave and tenacious, the flames on Hog's body never extinguished, and instead they burned bigger and bigger. Hog's injuries were accumulating. His roar was not as loud. His gnoll brothers were not so quick to respond to his orders. Even his movements seemed to be slow. Even if he had lost a lot of his rationality, he realized that he was in a bad situation. Slowly, Duque was able to cast a flame burst first, followed by an instant flame burst, before finally being slapped to death. All the tears in the mercenaries' glands were drained. They felt as if they had been played by this mysterious young mage, but it seemed that they had not. After all, Duque had told them to run from the beginning. Wasn't Duque fighting with his life to protect these burdens? As a mage with so many life-saving skills, it should not be a problem for him to escape alone, right? Even if Duque fell tragically every time and then rose from the ashes, his performance was enough to become a topic of conversation in the tavern after a meal. But they noticed something strange. The ordinary gnolls had long since dispersed and hid far away, watching in awe as their boss fought with the unkillable Duque. On the other side, Makarov solemnly instructed his men. We won't say a word about what we saw today, even if we go to hell. If I'm not wrong, this concerns a very important secret of Lord Duke Marcus. If we are lucky, we will be Sir Marcus retainers for the rest of our lives. Everyone shivered and nodded in unison. Such a strange ability was absolutely unheard of. Was there any lack of people who inadvertently learned the secrets of important figures and were killed? Being able to sell his body and not be killed was already a great thing. On the other side, Hog's life force was about to run out as he continued to accumulate injuries. Magic beam cannon. Duque roared out the name of the unknown move. With slow steps, he actually stepped onto the crook of Hog's left arm, which was hanging on the ground, and borrowed the force to step onto Hog's shoulder. Then, in an extremely pretentious manner, he inserted 2 fingers into Hog's eye sockets. Instant cast, flame blast, at 0 range. A woo. Unlike the high-spirited howl at the beginning, the final bitter howl contained too much unwillingness and indignation. However, the cry was only halfway through before it came to a screeching halt. This was because Hog's entire head was filled with flames that were rapidly expanding from within. A mere second later, the back of Hog's huge head exploded like a watermelon. The gnolls watching the battle from afar were frightened and fled in all directions. Standing proudly on the huge chest of Hog's collapsed body, Duque, who was bathed in a rain of blood, didn't have much of a sense of accomplishment. In the game before Duque transmigrated, Hog was just a level 11 elite monster. Even if he had the shocking nickname of Cute Killer, in the end he was just an unremarkable little monster. Unexpectedly, in order to kill Hog, he had to pay the price of 11 revivals. When he thought of this, Duke felt a sense of despair as if he had fallen to the ground. But now that he had the time to look at the system notifications, Duque suddenly froze. Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the elite demonified monster, Hog. You have successfully foiled an attempt on your life by one of Sardra's demons. Because Hog's body contains a small amount of demonic aura, if you give its remaining head to a cleric in Stormwind City, there might be an unexpected reward. You have obtained the blueprint of the skinning battle axe, which even low-intelligence creatures can make. As you have successfully killed the monster that killed you 11 times, you have recovered a small amount of your humanity. Your current soul force is 87, and your moral integrity is 72%. You are now a level 5 Earth Wizard. After reading this, Duque almost jumped up and immediately questioned the system elf in the spiritual world. Hey, what the hell is this? Why do I only have 72% moral integrity left? Because the one that killed you is a demonic creature. As a demon that can easily corrupt human souls, it will have a bonus effect when it kills you. In other words, if you are killed by a demon, your moral integrity will fall even faster. Duque almost choked on his own saliva. I hate demons the most. Unknowingly, Duque's sinister expression had scared the hell out of Makarov and the rest. Recalling Makarov's words, they fearfully knelt in front of Hog's giant corpse and lowered their heads, not even daring to look up at Duque. Makarov spoke. Thank you, Lord Marcus, for saving us. We have nothing to repay you with, so we hope to use our lowly lives to contribute to Lord Marcus's great cause. Duque was roused from his daze by the voice and his interest was piqued. Why? Originally, Duque wanted to ask why Makarov would say such a thing. Makarov looked at the murderous Duque and clearly misunderstood. He thought that Duque was asking them why they were spared. We are grateful to Lord Marcus for saving us, but we have seen Lord Marcus's undying secret. We don't want to die yet, so we are willing to serve Lord Marcus for life. Duque was stunned. He did not know why, but he recalled how Aurelia had deceived him the first time they met. Duque suddenly burst into laughter. Thank you for being willing to serve me. When Duque said this, Makarov and the rest heaved a long sigh of relief as if they had just walked through the gates of hell. Duque's next words immediately made their hearts jump to their throats. However, I cannot accept your allegiance for this reason. Makarov immediately panicked. Lord Marcus, At this moment, something unexpected happened. Not far from Duque's feet, a gnoll that was still alive suddenly jumped up and ruthlessly chopped at Duque's neck with a rough stone axe. It happened too quickly and no one had time to react. Ah! The mercenaries cried out in shock. At such a close distance they saw Duque's neck spurt out blood, and then he fell to the ground, dead. Heavens! What did Lord Marcus do? Before they could recover from their shock, Duque's corpse suddenly turned into a faint stream of light and disappeared. There was almost no transition, and Duque stood unscathed less than 2 steps away from the corpse. Damn you! A mere gnoll actually dared to sneak attack me. It was fine if he died in Hog's hands, but he was actually killed by an ordinary gnoll. This was really humiliating. Gnashing his teeth in hatred, Duque used a large fireball to teach that guy who dared to make him lose his moral integrity to a maggot for the rest of his life. With great difficulty he calmed down and Duque was that elegant Lord Mage again. See? This is just a type of magic. To be precise, it is my family's ancestral talent. Mirror image. Every mage family has its own inheritance. Some families are good at elemental magic and some are good at arcane magic. I am just the inheritor of a declining mage family. This is not some shocking secret that needs to be kept secret. Of course, this is also one of my trump cards and I do not want you to spread it around. Duque's performance made the mercenaries dumbfounded, but with such an explanation, every mercenary felt at ease. So it is mysterious magic. We commoners who do not know magic have really learned something new. Looking at their happy faces, Duque's heart ached. I've lost my moral integrity again. Chapter 41. Soul power at 86, moral integrity at 71%. This was Duque's current situation. Duque had no choice but to accept reality. What was bitter was that he had to die one more time to prevent his greatest magic weapon from being seen through so early. He didn't feel it after dying 11 times in a row, but now that he had calmed down he realized that death was such a painful thing. What was worse was that he had to die one more time for showing off without reason. Duque cursed in his heart. Shit on Sargeras, oh no Sargeras, it's all your fault you bastard. Regardless of whether you did it or not, it's all on your head. But what made Duque the most uncertain were the records in the system. Because you have died 3 times in a row in a short period of time, you have triggered the negative soul status, wrath, of the 7 sins. After reviving, your spell power will increase by 20%, your attack speed will increase by 30%, your evasion rate will decrease to 0, your defense will decrease by 30%, your willpower will increase by 200%, and you will be immune to most mental spells and special effects. After a bunch of messy messages, an even more eye-catching bright red notification appeared. Because you have been killed 10 times in a row by the elite demonified monster Null Leader, Hog, you have triggered the crazy special effect, Deathmatch Cage. You have lost your sense of self and automatically set Hog as the enemy you must kill. Before you completely kill Hog, you will continue to revive crazily and attack Hog with everything you can. Deathmatch Cage. After this special effect is triggered, every time you revive, your maximum HP and mana will temporarily decrease by 10%. Every time you revive, your spell power will increase by 10%, and your attack speed will increase by 10%. This special effect will continue until you kill the target or until you completely lose your humanity. After reading these messages, Duque was completely speechless. It seemed like dying consecutively would turn him into a berserker. But this was something even crazier than a gambler who had lost everything. A gambler. Either he would turn the tables in one go and kill his opponent, or he would become a ghoul and be completely finished. Of course, Duque did not forget the words 7 deadly sins. Anger, arrogance, jealousy. Just thinking about these characteristics made him feel like he was a demon king. If it wasn't for the fact that there weren't any normal girls in the Scourge army, which was made up entirely of immortals, and that if he joined the Scourge army, his attractiveness would plummet even further. Duque really wanted to join the Scourge army and take over the position of filthy demon king. Currently, the system elf was unable to determine just how strong the demonized Hog was. However, according to the original game's evaluation, Hog was at most an elite monster in the novice area. How strong could he be after demonization? No matter how strong he was, could he be stronger than those evil dragons, ancient gods, or the boss of the demon army? He suddenly realized that the road ahead was still long. The wind tonight was a little noisy. Duque was thinking about the problem. Unknowingly, the effects of his low moral integrity began to show. Humans were very sensitive creatures. Even though Duque said that it was not a big problem, the faint cold aura after he lost his moral integrity still made Makarov and the others, who were at their most sensitive period, even more anxious. They looked at each other and understood each other's thoughts. It seemed that this secret was quite important to Lord Marcus. Although not the most important, it was still quite important. At this moment, they already had their own assessment of the extent of the secret of Duque's ancestral, mirror image doppelganger. After a big battle, it was natural to clean up the battlefield. This kind of heavy work was naturally not done by Duque. Continuous resurrections would also bring about abnormal fatigue. Not only his body but also his soul. Due to the loss of his soul, Duque was a little sickly. Duque went to bed early. The next morning, when the first light of dawn appeared, the tragic battlefield last night had basically been cleaned up. A large number of gnolls killed by the ice storm had thawed, and there was no time to bury the bodies of these large gnolls. When they completely thawed, they would become vultures' food. Makarov respectfully came to the carriage and reported, "Stormwind has a unified bounty for gnolls. A pair of adult gnoll's claws is 10 silver coins, but such a large gnoll's bounty is estimated to be even higher. The most important thing is Hog's claws. Apart from Stormwind City, at least 5 towns in the Elven Forest have set up independent bounties for him. May I ask, Lord Marcus, how should we deal with it?" Duque's eyes turned a little coldly. "How do you think we should deal with it?" Being swept by Duque's slightly sharp gaze, Makarov thought that Duque was testing him and immediately answered the answer he had been pondering for a long time. "If Lord Marcus is at ease, I will leave my son here and bring 2 people with me to transport Hog's head and claws back to Stormwind City. I can guarantee that within a week, Lord Marcus's reputation for killing Hog will spread through half of Stormwind. Leaving his son was equivalent to handing over the hostage. But Duque did not care at all. He was thinking about something else. Last time he obtained Northshire Abbey's reputation, it seemed that he had recovered a point of moral integrity. Now that he killed Hog and it was a demonized Hog at that, how much reputation would he gain? Forget it, if he could recover a point then so be it. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Makarov, how about this? I don't need your mercenary band to protect me from now on. I have something more important to entrust to you. Please speak. Makarov was excited. A few days ago an outpost should have been attacked by Hog and his men. So not only do you need to publicize my achievements, but I also want you to give half of the bounty to the injured and the widows of the victims as compensation. Makarov immediately understood and asked, "What happens after everything is done?" "We all owe you our lives, Lord Marcus. We will be happy to serve you." Duque thought for a moment. His plan did indeed require someone to run errands. "Then after everything is done, come to Moon Creek Town and wait for me. I will be back in 2 weeks at most." "All right." Duque had already asked around. The current Moon Creek Town was not the desolate town that was controlled by the Defias Brotherhood and was filled with bandits and bandits. As a pioneer town at the borders of Stormwind, there were more than 1,000 residents and a lord. The Baron had formed a militia of 100 men as a necessary military force. Perhaps this was the predecessor of the Western Wilderness People's Army in the future. Duque's target was not there. Instead, he set his sights on the northern coastline of the Western Wilderness. There were many fishmen there. Chapter 42. Murlocs were the most common and annoying monsters in the world of Azeroth. They could be seen in almost all tidal flats and wide lakes. They had slippery skin, smart eyes that were bigger than your fist, and dorsal fins that were extremely stylish. Their bright colors and roguish style were their trademark. Murlocs on their own were absolutely useless, and the following would often happen in a one-on-one fight. "Caw!" The Murlocs squawked and started fighting without saying a word. "Caw!" They felt a little pain and immediately turned and ran. Chase them. These monsters with strong limbs and a fish head and body could run fast and they could swim. Run home as soon as you started chasing. Caw 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 caw. In no time a large group of Murlocs would run towards you and teach you a lesson. If you beat them all away with your arrogance, then the result would be that more mere people would join in the pursuit of you. This chain reaction that could easily explode caused Duque to suffer greatly back then. So why did Duque want to find Murlocs? Firstly, Murlocs were the vassals of some powerful deep-sea creature that was still in slumber or waiting. Could be said that Murlocs were used to being enslaved. Secondly, Murlocs were not as stupid as many people thought they were. Part of the evidence showed that their steady and gradual occupation of land was in fact highly coordinated and organized. However, whether this plan was in line with the Murlocs' own wishes and interests was unknown. Most importantly, that day in Elven Forest, after giving the corpse of a poor thief from the Brando family to the Murlocs as supper, Duque suddenly discovered a strange language in the system notification. Murloc. The amazing system actually directly deciphered the relatively simple Murloc language. Before transmigrating, knowing 2 foreign languages was more reliable when looking for a job than going to university. Unexpectedly, it seemed to be the same after transmigrating. After linking with the translation software provided by the system genie, even though Duque wanted to say Motherf ****, what came out of his mouth was a hilarious cadence of wah caw. This gave Duque a possibility. Perhaps he could subdue the Murlocs. Under normal circumstances, Duque would never be so stupid as to do such a thing. But thinking about it, the beastmen had yet to attack and the door of darkness had yet to open. In the world of Azeroth, no matter which country it was all about seniority. If Duque didn't find another way, it would be impossible for him to improve himself to the point where he could influence the battle before the door of darkness opened. Only by doing so would there be a chance to turn the impossible into the possible. So early in the morning, Duque went to the beach alone. He was already prepared to communicate with the Murlocs with magic, kill the mentally retarded ones, leave the less retarded ones, and finally arrange for a slightly more intelligent Murloc sage to be his representative. However, Duque suddenly discovered that, On the beach, two large Murloc tribes were playing clan conflict. Wow. Hundreds of fishmen were fighting on both sides. The scene must be bloody and violent, with flesh and blood flying everywhere and blood boiling, right? Duque suddenly realized that it was stupid of him to have such expectations. Hundreds of Murlocs fighting, the scene was more like a super large scale hide and seek. Yo, over here Murloc Tribe A gathered 3 Murlocs against 2 Murlocs of Murloc Tribe B. Sorry, there was no such thing as a battle. The side with fewer numbers ran away as soon as they met. Obviously they had 2 short legs, but they ran faster than rabbits. Suddenly 2 Murlocs ran into 2 of their own tribe's clowns. Great, it became 3-4 again. Decisive counterattack. Oh no, counterattack. It was the turn of the 3 Murlocs to run away. It was not easy to gather 2 Murlocs of similar strength. One Murloc's first-generation Murloc fiercely threw a stone, causing the other Murloc's second-generation to have his eyes swollen. The other side suddenly lost all their courage and scattered. Listening to the strange gawk-gawk sound in the Murloc language, it roughly translated as, "It's not that the National Army didn't work hard, but the Japanese Army has Gundam. Gundam your sister. You call that piece of rock a high-speed kinetic weapon? You should apologize to all the Gundams in the world right now." Hearing the Boolsh *T translation of the system elf, Duque even wanted to strangle the system elf to death. But it was also good. Seeing this Boolsh *T battle of the Murlocs, Duque also gave up the plan to organize the Murlocs into an army. Knowing that the other side was all a staff, he still specially went over to sell swords. Duque was not that stupid. With a long sigh, Duque made his move. In the original plan, Duque felt that he had to kill at least 100 Murlocs to make these clowns calm down a little. Who knew that as soon as Duque made his move, all the Murlocs fell into a dead silence. The next moment the sound of gawk was endless. On the beach a large number of Murlocs bowed their heads and bowed. The only reason was Duque's hand of magic. Hand of magic was a mage condensing the simplest arcane energy into the shape of a human palm, to do some simple work for the mage. For example, picking up a certain key from the place that was hanging high outside the iron cage. Duque's hand of magic was slightly different. After the system elf automatically extracted the operation of the motion capture system from Duque's head, Duque estimated that his hand of magic should be at least a level 2 spell. Because not only the quantity, but also the quality was not something that a regular mage could achieve. 8 palms of light floated in the void behind Duque, and 4 hands of magic easily tore apart the Murloc that charged the fastest and intended to attack Duque. "Gawu, great emissary of the ocean, I, an old blind man, submit to you on behalf of all the tribes on the west coast. Oh, great god of the ocean, I, Yu Mao, submit to you on behalf of all the tribes on the west coast." Hundreds of fishmen knelt down and worshipped Duque like he was a god. This scene was really comical. It was done so easily. It was so easy that Duque found it hard to believe. Perhaps it proved that there was no free lunch in this world. Suddenly there was a violent splashing sound on the seashore. Duque's pupils suddenly constricted. It was some creatures that shouldn't be here. Naga. Unlike other monsters in the world of Azeroth, Naga were actually quite noble. About 10,000 years ago, the leader of the Burning Legion, Sardras, tempted Queen Azhara of the High Elven Kingdom and a group of High Elven nobles, asking them to prepare to open a portal for the Burning Legion to invade the world of Azeroth. This ancient war ended with the defeat of the Demon King, Sardras. And when Queen Azhara and her cronies fell into the sea in order to survive, they accepted the call of the ancient gods and all transformed into Naga, half-human, half-snake creatures that could survive at the bottom of the sea. Therefore, Nagas were actually creatures with extremely high intelligence. And because the female Naga inherited the beauty of the high elves, their upper bodies were quite beautiful, but their lower bodies were just snake bodies. At this moment, 2 groups of Naga were obviously fighting. As soon as the female Naga at the front saw the Murlocs, she shouted in the Murloc language, "I command you in the name of Avis to help me block those stupid male Nagas behind me." Chapter 43. What the hell was Avis? Duque didn't know. But he could guess that since the Nagas all originated from the High Elf Queen Azhara and her immediate nobles, this should be the name of a more noble clan among the Nagas. Needless to say, as soon as this name came out, Those stupid murlocs all shivered as if they had pissed themselves. They all looked suspiciously at Duque, the emissary of the sea. Humph. Duque snorted coldly. He didn't know why the murlocs were worshipping him, but most of it had to do with the hand of magic he had created. Wasn't it just a competition of hands? Come on. Who's afraid of who? Duque raised his hand, and the system elf linkage was immediately activated. Although Hand of Magic was a level 2 spell after being strengthened, the energy consumption and requirements of this spell were all mediocre level 0 spells. There was no burden at all. In the blink of an eye, 108 hands of magic that were flashing with blue arcane radiance floated in the air neatly in the mysterious formation of wings. His aura was definitely top-notch. The only thing that made Duque dumbfounded was the gestures of these hands of magic. Why the hell were they all raising their middle fingers? What was a forest of middle fingers? This was a forest of middle fingers. The shining middle fingers exuded supreme disdain and contempt. Hey, what's going on? Why are they all middle fingers? Duque roared at the system elf in his heart. This is the gesture I detected the most from the host, and I accidentally automatically set this as the starting gesture for Hand of Magic. Change it. Change it all. From now on, ordinary palms will do. As you will. Fortunately, the international gestures didn't seem to work here. Neither the murlocs nor the nagas understood it. However, the murlocs perfectly misunderstood the gestures that Duque made. After being the servants of high-level aquatic creatures for more than 10,000 years, the merfolk didn't remember many things. However, there was one type of hand gesture that they had to remember. The direction that the leader always used his finger to point in, that could only mean one thing. You scum, attack. Gagagagalolololo. This sea god has more hands, he's the real one. Kill the low-level imposter. A 6-armed naga is more awesome than a 4-armed naga, and an 8-armed naga is more awesome than a 6-armed naga. In any case, in the simple minds of the fishmen, whoever had more hands was the boss. Duque had 108 hands on his side. Duque was definitely a genuine ancient sea god. Regardless of whether Duque believed it or not, the fishmen believed it. Duque's hundreds of magicians' hands seemed to have injected a kind of power into the hearts of these somewhat stupid creatures. That power was called confidence. During the era when the sea creatures were at their strongest, they dominated the entire Azeroth. The sea creatures with multiple arms were like flags on the battlefield. Wherever they were, they represented the will of the sea, absolutely invincible. Contrary to the hide-and-seek battle, just now the murlocs were 100 times more courageous. They turned around and charged towards the nagas like a swarm of bees. The murlocs were not a pure melee race. Not only were they holding simple spears and other weapons, but there were also many murloc wise men whose hands emitted the light of magic. The unscientific fact that the murlocs could use frost arrow magic was also perfectly reflected in the world of Azeroth. Compared to the murlocs, the nagas were definitely strong, but they were not strong enough to ignore the number of murlocs. The leading female naga's face turned pale. Completely unable to ignore these crazy murlocs, the female naga named Avis finally squeezed out a word from her mouth. Go! With the ocean behind them, they did not dare to turn back. They could only risk rushing to the mouth of a small river on the left of Duque, attempting to enter the inner part of the western wilderness to take refuge. A smile appeared on the corner of Duque's mouth. He did not stop this group of nagas. Instead, the finger of the magician's hand did not change, pointing to the group of nagas behind them. The murlocs fought with the nagas behind them. Even if they did not collapse, they would still be food for the murlocs. Many male nagas wielding huge tridents danced the weapons in their hands like wind and fire wheels. Every strike could split at least one murloc in half. But the murloc's fearlessness shocked them. Once upon a time, as long as one of the murlocs was lightly stabbed, the rest would die and run away screaming. But now, although fear and panic could still be seen in their eyes, it could clearly be felt that they were dominated by a darker fear and a stronger will. All of this obviously originated from the human on the beach with many palms of light floating around him. How dare you? A mere human dares to command our naga servants to attack us. The largest naga leader was furious. Completely ignoring the frost arrow of the murloc wise man, he suddenly waved his trident and swept it 3 times in a row, dyeing the surrounding sea red with the blood and internal organs of the murlocs. He fiercely swung his long snake-like tail, breaking open a clear white wave mark from far to near on the rippling blue sea surface. In just 20 seconds he killed through the entire line of murlocs, killed his way to the shore and rushed to within 10 steps in front of Duque. Insignificant human. Pay the price for blaspheming the god of the sea. The price is your life. Duque was actually very weak at sea battles. If it was swimming, he was a piece of trash who could swim 50 meters in the pool by himself, and any further would be like playing with weights. Why did he sink into the water? But the Nagas on the shore. Haha. Chapter 44. Under the awe-inspiring gaze of hundreds of murlocs and Nagas, Duque slowly walked up to the Naga leader, raised his right hand gently and spoke in the clearest murloc language. As the price for offending me, I will now punish you with the 100 hands of dismemberment. In the next second, nearly 100 hands of magic swarmed forward. The fingernails of these hands of magic, which were shaped like human palms, suddenly sharpened and lengthened, becoming similar to the claws of demons. Every finger was a fatal iron hook. The dark gray scales of the Naga leader were dug off piece by piece and discarded on the beach. His thick and tight skin that ordinary human daggers couldn't pierce was torn off, revealing scarlet muscles and tendons. This wasn't the end. The torture continued. Every piece of muscle, every tendon had been ripped out alive. Hearing the Naga leader's never-ending screams, both the murlocs and the Nagas stopped fighting. They watched the massacre in horror and bewilderment. Even Duque himself didn't notice that his expression was so cold at this moment, as if what he was dissecting alive was not a huge humanoid creature that was twice his height, but a live fish. The Naga was very tenacious, and as the male leader his physique was the strongest in the clan. So he suffered extra pain. He wailed for a full 5 minutes before he died completely. During this time, the Nagas behind him had already retreated to the depths of the sea without a sound. Only hundreds of murlocs were still crawling near Duque in awe. When Duque came back to his senses, he was shocked to find that the most majestic Naga had been killed by him. I did this? Duque was also surprised. Host, to be precise, you did it when you entered the cold mode just now, the system elf reminded Duque. This is the complication of losing my moral integrity? When one's humanity is lost to a certain extent, it is indeed easy to have various mental states. But in the mode just now, your casting speed increased by 45%, and your spell strength increased by 32%. If you encounter a strong enemy in the future, I suggest that you enter this state by force, host. Are there any sequelae? Not yet. All right. I'll consider it. After the fight, Duque was a little hungry. His stomach made a grumbling sound. Then, miraculously, the leader of the murlocs named Yumao presented his treasure. Well, it was a fresh, live fish. System notification. Murloc leader Yumao hopes that you can enjoy fresh silverhead salmon in front of everyone. If you do this, it will help increase the loyalty of these two merfolk tribes. Duque was a little embarrassed. If he remembered correctly, fresh silverhead salmon was a specialty of Stranglethorn Vale. Stranglethorn Vale was in the southern part of the western wilderness. As the leader of the murlocs, it was not strange for fish spear to be captured. Looking at the pitiful eyes of the fishmen, Duque gave in. In any case, salmon was salmon. It wasn't the first time he ate salmon raw. It was a pity that there was no soy sauce or wasabi. Wait a minute. There was wasabi too. Not far from Duque saw a pile of weeds that the murlocs had gotten from who knows where. There was horseradish among them. After all, horseradish was wasabi after being dried and ground into powder. They usually grew in places like valleys and rivers. Taking the horseradish directly and skipping the grinding step, Duque took out a knife and ate it raw. Duque did not know that this scene was seen by the group of Nagas who had just run to the river. Due to the distance, they could only see Duque make a few gestures on the bloody male Naga, then eat the raw fish. Blarg. A Naga vomited. Devil. This human is definitely a devil. Not only is his magic power extremely powerful, but he also calculated everything accurately. He is also a terrifying existence that dares to eat raw Naga meat. The leader Avis was trembling all over. Ooh. Suddenly, not far from Avis, there was a murloc's cry. Not good. I've been discovered. It was too late to silence them. The entire murloc tribe was in an uproar. The Murlocs who were eager to curry favor with their new master Duque had already surrounded the Nagas. Unlike the last time, there were no other targets to help them divert the Murlocs' attention this time. Moreover, they had personally proven that the river was a dead end. Duque smiled. It was absolutely normal for this group of Nagas to be unable to escape. In the entire western wilderness except for the large river that separated the elven forest and the western wilderness that could be called a river, all the rivers that extended to the sea were small rivers. Not far from the shore, it would become a narrow underground river. Nagas and Murlocs were both aquatic creatures and could not go too far from the shore. After leaving the river, it was the wasteland of the western wilderness and all kinds of monsters. Just now, there were already many corpse shredder birds and vultures circling in the sky. It could be said that this group of Nagas had just run into a dead end by themselves. Naga Avis, are you going to put down your weapons and come over, or should I let the Murlocs carry your bodies over? Duque spoke in the common human language, but he knew that the Nagas would definitely understand. The Nagas, who were born as high elves, were also very talented in languages. Avis bit her lip fiercely. The situation was beyond her control. In the end, she threw down the scepter in her hand and allowed the Murlocs to rush forward and carry away her and her subordinates' weapons. Most of the wounded Nagas stayed a few dozen steps away. Only Avis was brought to Duque, who was sitting on a boulder on the beach. Not daring to look up at Duque, who was on the boulder, Avis glanced at the male Naga who was torn apart alive not far away. He retracted his gaze as if he was startled. He crossed his 4 smooth arms and bowed. Respected human powerhouse, Vara Furlan, Avis pays her respects to you. Furlan? Why would the Furlan Nagas of the secret Blood Island come to the western wilderness? Duque had only asked casually, but it set off a storm in Vara's heart. The secret Blood Island was such a secret place that even many human historians did not know about. How did this human mage know about it? All of a sudden, Vara had the terrifying illusion that all her secrets had been seen through by Duque. We are exiles. Exiles. Exiles were the pitiful creatures who had been abandoned by their tribes and could only fend for themselves. Those who did well were like the high elves of Kuel Salis, establishing a new territory and making a name for themselves. Those who did poorly were like Vara in front of him, being hunted down everywhere. May I know your name, sir, and how will you deal with us? Me. Initially, Duque wanted to say it directly, but on second thought he was a human and a little mage with no reputation at all. It did not seem right for him to take in a large number of alien underlings at this time, so he randomly made up a name. I am the hundred-handed death god Wuxia. You can call me Lord Hua. Chapter 45. Hundred-handed Reaper? An extremely unfamiliar title. Var really did not know which big shot in the human kingdom had this title. However, seeing the hundreds of hands of magic that were still floating around Duque, Vara felt that this title was extremely appropriate. Since Duque had announced his name, Vara inexplicably felt a little more at ease. It seemed that this big shot did not intend to kill them. Vara tactfully bowed deeply again. Be glad, Vara, that there is a place for you in my plan. Give me your absolute loyalty and that of your subordinates. As a reward for your loyalty, you will receive a vast place to settle down. The entire coastal waters of the western wilderness will become the territory of your clan, and all the Murlocs here will listen to you. As for humans, with me here humans are not a problem. Duque's words were arrogant and extremely arrogant, but Vara did not think that Duque's words were exaggerated in any way. The Murlocs were afraid of the Nagas. For the past 10,000 years, they were willing to be driven by the Nagas, and they only recognized whoever had more arms as the boss. She knew that Duque's hands were all magical creations, but such lifelike and flexible palms were definitely not something that an ordinary mage could do. Feeling the amazing magic aftermath where Duque killed the male Naga leader Nuruk, Vara was secretly shocked. She knew very well that Duque was not an opponent that she could contend with, so she decided to give her loyalty even if it was temporary. I, Vara Wrathscale Elvis, on behalf of the Wrathscale subclan, would be happy to serve you, master. Vara waved her hand and said a few words to the 30 or so clansmen in the Naga language. Suddenly all the Nagas knelt to Duque. Get up. As Duque spoke proudly, hands of magic twice as many as the Nagas held their elbows and helped them up. For a moment, all the Nagas' expressions changed. After all, they did not see how powerful Duque was. Only the many murlocs were willing to be driven by Duque, and the corpse of Nuruk who was chasing them could serve as proof. But at this moment, the invincible power of Hand of Magic made them shudder. A pair of hands made of magic energy actually had such power. This power could be used to lift them up or strangle them to death. The Naga's reverence for Duque deepened. Duque felt that something was missing after confirming the status of ruler and subject. He suddenly remembered the soul imprint that Medivh had left on his chest. System Elf, can I create a soul imprint similar to Medivh's? According to my calculations, you don't have enough magic power to leave an imprint on the other party's soul in a state of resistance. On the other hand, if the opponent doesn't resist, the mage's mark is just like a level 0 spell. Can you add some material? The system elf instantly understood Duque's thoughts. Sure. At this time, Duque's right index finger shone with a cold white radiance. That was the radiance of a spell of ice energy. Vara, open your heart, I have something to bestow upon you. Now that it was Duque who had the final say, Vara certainly did not dare to resist. She swayed her long snake tail and came in front of Duque. Although Duque's movements seemed to be full of flaws to Vara, he did not even have the most basic mage shield. She clearly felt that she could kill this human who was about to enslave her in one hit, but Vara did not dare. The hands of magic floating around Duque were so elusive that she really did not know how powerful these hands of magic were. She stepped forward respectfully, closed her eyes, and let Duque's fingers touch the center of her eyebrows. As the white radiance passed through her eyelids, it became brighter and brighter, almost to the point where Vara could not bear it. A chill penetrated from the center of her eyebrows into Vara's soul. Ugh! The feeling of coldness was so strong that it almost melted Vara's brain. Vara immediately realized that this was not an ordinary mage's mark. Not only did it invade her soul, but it also stuck to all of her magic circuits. It's over. This time she really had to be loyal to this little human to the death. At this moment, Vara finally extinguished the last of her little rebellious thoughts. As if in response to Vara's newfound loyalty, Vara suddenly felt a sense of enlightenment. She could clearly feel that her ice spells had been significantly improved. It was not the kind of forced increase in power that would have side effects, but a simplified model of the more perfect use of ice spells, imprinted in her soul. In the future, as the years passed and her strength grew, the power of her ice spells would also increase proportionally. This great power. Looking at Duque's young face, Vara could not believe that this was Duque's doing. Duque actually imprinted the metamagic expertise that only he could comprehend on his own to her. Vara looked back at the surface of the water and saw the bright emblem on his forehead. It was a black emblem with the skull of the Grim Reaper in the middle. Beside the skull were countless mages' hands that were faintly visible. It really was the emblem of the 100-handed god of death. Vara no longer had any other thoughts and bowed deeply. Master, what instructions do you have next? Which clan's Naga were chasing you just now? That's the Grey-Scale clan from Stranglethorn Vale in the south of the western wilderness, but Master killed their chief warrior. I'm afraid they won't dare to come until we find strong reinforcements. And it will take at least 2 months for Stranglethorn Vale to come here and back, so we shouldn't have to worry about the Grey-Scale clan in the short term. Alright then. Raven pointed to the huge one-eyed murloc. In the past month, in addition to settling your clan, you brought Old Blind to bring all the murlocs on the coast of the western wilderness under your command. When the time comes, I will personally show my power to all the leaders of the murlocs. What else? I want pearls. Big and small pearls, the more beautiful the better. You let the Fishspear clan do that. After a week I will come here again to collect the goods. Until this moment, Duque finally revealed what he was plotting. Yes. Pearls. The world of Azeroth was not the world where pearls were cultivated before Raven came to this world. Pearls were a rare luxury in the 7 human kingdoms, and even in Kuel Salis of the elves. It was very simple, all the pearls were in the sea, and the sea was the territory of the murlocs and Naga. Humans could build powerful warships to conquer all targets on the surface of the sea, but they could do nothing to the bottom of the sea. It was not that no human had any ideas on the Naga, but the Naga's nest was usually at the bottom of the sea. Who would be like Duque and wipe out a whole small tribe? Speaking of which, Duque had only planned to deal with the murlocs before. Hearing Duque's request, Vara secretly sighed. Different races had different values. Pearls were really not a problem for the Naga. Chapter 46. The wind blew across the wasteland. Yellow soil filled one's eyes. Endless desolation, endless bitterness. As pioneers, the people of Moon Creek Town had to face all sorts of troubles. It was as if trouble had become a part of their lives. Another mine collapse? Another monster in the wilderness? Mountain dog? Corpse shredder bird? Gnoll? Blood-toothed boar? All sorts of monsters became the topic of conversation in the only bar in Moon Creek Town. Under the bright candlelight, the air in the bar was filled with the sour smell of men working all day, the strong smell of alcohol and the sound of heated discussions. However, there was a new topic of conversation in the bar recently. It was a young wizard called Duke Marcus. I heard that a wizard with the surname Marcus killed Hog? A farmer suddenly asked his companion. That powerful 2-meter-tall Knoll Hog? No. It should be 4 meters tall. A few days ago when I passed by Sentinel Ridge, I saw Hog's headless corpse. It was terrifying. Even though the corpse was already rotten, it was still at least 1.5 stories tall. A peddler who had obviously just returned said. What about the head? The farmer asked. I heard that the head and claws were sent to Stormwind City and Goldflash Town in the Elven Forest for public display. Amazing. Quang Gong sighed. Of course. Lord Duke Marcus is the second genius in Stormwind's history to become an official wizard with a 9th-grade talent. The middle-aged mercenary interrupted, pride written all over his face. Moon Creek Town was not big. There were only 1,000 people in the town. Even if he did not know their names, he could still recognize them. Do you know that Lord Marcus? Of course. I'm his subordinate. The mercenary said without hiding anything. Come on. The followers of the wizard are all very strong, even stronger than our town's #1 knight, Rillick. Quang Gong ridiculed the mercenary. But in the next moment Quang Gong was speechless. It should be said that everyone in the bar was speechless. Yo Makarov, you're here. An ordinary greeting with a dazzling entrance. His blue and white mage robe and dazzling mage emblem proved his identity, but the 5 sharp icicles hovering above his shoulders deepened everyone's impression of him. It was illogical for the icicles to float in the air, but if it was on the body of a powerful mage, then it would become reasonable no matter how illogical it was. Sir Marcus, you are... Oh, this is just a part of my self-cultivation, Duque replied casually. Makarov did not pursue the matter any further. He did not understand the world of the mages even if he listened. However, this did not stop him and the people around him from feeling that even though they did not understand it, they still felt that it was amazing. Makarov stared blankly at the bag in Duque's hand. Let's talk upstairs. Makarov had already arrived along with a few of his men. Makarov led Duque to his room and a few of his men guarded the door. Below, the rest of the people in Moon Creek Town were in an uproar. Wow, that's Duke Marcus. So young. What a promising young man. Why did he come to Moon Creek Town? There's nothing good in the western wilderness that could attract such a big shot like him, right? Could it be that he found a new mineral or specialty? How is that possible? What else is there in the western wilderness apart from various crops and a few ordinary iron and copper mines? None of them expected that Duque had really developed a new specialty for the western wilderness. Inside the room, Makarov and the other mercenaries were dazzled by the treasures on the table. Pearls of all sizes. From the smallest pearls that did not have much luster to the small lustrous pearls, to the more precious black pearls, and finally to the most dazzling golden pearls, which were the size of an infant's fist. So many pearls almost made Makarov's heart stop beating. Of course, apart from the pearls, there were also all kinds of beautiful corals, transparent yellow tortoise shells, but the most dazzling were the pearls. This is the specialty of the western wilderness that I developed. I intend to establish a shipping route and name it the Pearl Route. Hiss, the mercenaries simultaneously gasped. A shipping route. It was not something that could be done in one go. A shipping route meant that Duque's pearls would have a stable source of income. Makarov, who was the most knowledgeable among them, could not help but feel suspicious. Please forgive my presumptuousness, but the entire coast of the western wilderness is filled with murlocs that can never be completely killed, sir. How did you? Oh. Well, it was a coincidence that I controlled a Murloc tribe. The Murlocs were the ones who collected the pearls for me. Makarov could not help but cry out in shock. Legend had it that mages would rear strange familiars as their servants. But the Murlocs. Moreover, the Murlocs were crude, cruel, and had low intelligence. This was inconceivable. However, from the moment they met, Makarov realized that the youth in front of him was a person who could turn the impossible into the possible. From the initial shock, he had become a little numb, even blindly believing. "Sir, is there anything I can do for you? I've already paid for a batch of ships from Old Jackson at the Stormwind shipyard. They should be ready by now. Bring me as many as we have. The sailors can be found at the head of the horses. The first batch of boatmen will be paid double, to be paid in full before the ship sets sail. Also, be sure to plant my flag on the bow of every ship." Looking at the few flags that Duque took out, Makarov was a little suspicious, but he did not ask. Instead he asked, "What about you, sir? I can't leave for now. As for the money, you can sell the pearls here first." No. "Sir, you still have a lot of money left from killing Hog. It's enough to hire sailors. I don't know the price of pearls, so it's better for you to handle it yourself." Duque rubbed his eyebrows. Indeed, there were too few people who could work for him. This was an era where illiterate people walked everywhere. It was easy to find a muscular man but difficult to find someone with brains. Most civilians would not deal with merchants unless they had no other choice. However, Duque could not leave. As long as the threat from the Naga tribe was not resolved, there would be no peace here. "Then let's do it. But bring some back as proof that I opened up the pearl route. Also, help me find Mage Norton from the Royal Magic Academy, and ask him to help me apply for the exclusive rights of this route." "Exclusive rights?" "You think the nobles will interfere?" "Sir is wise." Makarov was a yes man. "Don't worry, let them come." Duque's black eyes flashed with a cruel light. "You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.